obedience, and true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of all arts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This meeting of the Honourable Senate for Friday, June the 26th, 2020 is called to order. Before the item Oath of Allegiance, I take the opportunity to welcome Member of Parliament, Minister Horace Chang, who has joined us this morning. Madam Clerk. Oath of Allegiance.
Tova, Tani, Hamilton.
I, Tova Tane Hamilton, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Jamaica, that I will uphold and defend the Constitution and the laws of Jamaica, and that I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my responsibilities to the people of Jamaica. So help me God.
I take this opportunity to welcome Senator Tova Hamilton. Thank you, Minister. I'm of the view that perhaps one or two of you may wish to say something. Minister?
Mr. President, with your leave, thank you so much. What a pleasant way to start the day, to start the sitting on this Friday, the 26th of June, 2020. As we welcome young, vibrant, smart, energetic, committed to Jamaica, hard-working Senator Tova Hamilton to this chamber. Mr. President, I wasn't going to pull that card. And the locks are longer. But Mr. President, it is a truth to say that Senator Hamilton will bring her own love for Jamaica, her own sensitivity to our culture, her own work ethic honed over the years, and her deliberation to the debates in this House. She also brings us to the percentage of 29% women in the Senate. I had to go through and check to make sure, said no, it only was three. Each time it has been across administration, a maximum of 3 on the government side and 2 on the opposition side. And somehow informally that formula has been kept, but it has been broken today. New ground has been broken. And it gives extra pleasure to our welcome. But I will not go on, Mr. President, because we would like to hear from her, and of course we wish to hear from the Leader of Opposition Business in her welcome. So I thank you for offering me leave to just say a few words of welcome. Thank you, Mr. President.
Leader of Opposition Business, I think you are going to introduce your batsman.
May I just briefly welcome you, Senator, and adopt the words of the Leader of Government Business when they say that it is a special pleasure because it means that the ranks of female in the Senate have been increased by your presence. Of course, I do know that one of my senators has a lot in common with you, and so I actually delegated the formal welcome from this side to her, since I thought it was very appropriate that certain acknowledgments be made about your arrival here. But I do look forward to seeing the spirit which the leader has mentioned being demonstrated here in a way in which Jamaica will be enriched by that contribution which you will make. Welcome.
Senator Fraser-Binns.
Mr. President, Senator Hamilton, let me join with the Leader of Government Business and the Leader of Opposition Business to welcome you here. You will find that in this Senate, there are a lot of things that unite us. So, for example, you'll find that we all unite around creating a Jamaica that is safe, that is secure, and that ensures that everyone can achieve their goal, though we differ on how to achieve that objective. You will find that we unite perhaps on particular issues. So when it comes on to gender issues, we cross the aisle. You will find that we unite because perhaps, just perhaps, we all were on the same hall on campus. So the erudite, for example, will think that they are. But in this Senate, we know that Taylor is the Hall of Halls. Senator Morrison, you agree? It is the Hall of Halls. But we also unite Senator Hamilton around schools. So Senator Braham, for example, and Senator Crawford will want to think that it is about Fortis, Kingston College. But we know in this Senate, we know that, and a moment of silence, I want to say something, Mr. President, and I don't want to be disturbed. Because we know that in this Senate, there is none such as Westwood High School for girls. You know, Mr. President, we say, and I know Senator Scott Motley and Senator Morgan have an affiliation because of the institution they went to, whose name I can't recall. But there's none so great as the Westwood High School. Mr. President, there is something that we say at Westwood in our school song that Westwood sitting there upon a hilltop, as if you were a tribute to the sun. Our alma mater, you have helped to build up the careers of 1,000 little ones. And it goes on to say, it teaches us to live as sisters all should. And persons are often amazed to see how 6 Westwood girls can sit around a table for 2. It is the things we learn at Westwood. And so because of that, I have the highest expectations from you. And I know that in every way you will fulfill those expectations in this Senate. And you will join the line of Westwood girls who have distinguished themselves both in public and the private sector. And we expect the same from you. Senator Hamilton, may you be here as long as you wish. And we know after certain events, you will be coming back here, perhaps to sit in that seat. And with that said, welcome, welcome, Senator Hamilton.
Senator Tova Hamilton.
Mr. President.
Just before you
Yes.
begin, I'm sure you will, but of course the Senate acknowledges your mom, who is here with us. Hyacinth Minto Hensley. Hyacinth happens to be my mom's name, so welcome. Uncle Courtney Hamilton, who is here, and Aunt Lorna Fowler. So welcome all of you to the Senate. A very proud day for you all. And of course, a very proud day for our newly minted senator. Senator Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand too well the value of taking and adhering to instructions, and I was instructed today that I have a limited time within which to make this presentation. But I was also instructed to adopt the tailor's rule of measuring twice and cutting once. So I ensure that out of abundance of caution, I made certain contemplations and recorded my thoughts in the interest of time and accuracy. It would not be a great thing to squander the time that I have here to say thank you. So on the top of my list, Mr. President, is the Most Honourable Prime Minister. I acknowledge that with this appointment, a great level of confidence is being placed in me and my abilities. I now have a responsibility to ensure I execute my duties in this honourable House with distinction and prowess, and I will not take this for granted. I must also acknowledge that this appointment is quite symbolic to me because it represents two things. One, it represents hope, and yes, hope for many, but in particular for those young men and women who may be watching today from Deeside, Calabar, Prospect, Bounty Hall, Clarkstown, Newtown, Falmouth, and Trelawney, who can now feel inspired to dream big and to do great things because I stand here as a manifestation of what is possible for them. Two, it represents change. And not just a change that is to come, but the change that is already here. Mr. President, I believe our society is no longer satisfied with the diet it has traditionally been fed, and we have become a more discerning people and quite passionate about our future. We crave innovation, we crave transformation, we crave diversity and inclusion, and recently we have been experiencing pockets of satiety, but I believe we yearn for more. I would like to thank you, Mr. President, for taking a chance on me. The moves you have made to get me here have not gone unnoticed. I also say thank you. Thank you to the Honourable Dr. Horace Chang for his continuous guidance and support on what has been so far for me a very eventful journey. I acknowledge my family here in the gallery today, witnessing this momentous occasion. You are all my family here, either through blood or adoption. Your support for me has been unwavering, and I must thank you. I have to specially recognize my ever supportive and loving mother, Hyacinth Minto Hensley. You have taught me to be courageous, the value of hard work, and to be ambitious. A very happy birthday to my brother, Ron Hensley, could not make it today. I could not have asked for a better brother. And I will say to him to continue the good fight, to keep us all safe, and to continue to serve and protect. We appreciate you. My Trelawney Northern family, at the end of it all, this appointment belongs to you. Mr. President, I trust I did not abuse my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Statements by ministers? Announcements?
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: Ministry Paper number 30 of 2020 and the Biosafety Policy for Jamaica. Ministry Paper number 31 of 2020 and the St. Thomas Tourism Destination Development and Management Plan and Synopsis. Ministry Paper number 32 of 2020 and White Paper number 1 of 2020 entitled The Tourism Networks Policy and Strategy. Ministry Paper number 33 of 2020, an annual report of the Administrator General's Department for the year 2017-2018. The Jamaica Gazette Supplement Proclamation Regulation, Rules and Regulations, the Income Tax Employments Amendment Regulations 2020 under the Income Tax Act. The Emergency Powers number 2 Continuance Resolution 2020 under the Emergency Powers Act, and the Auditor General's audit of the COVID-19 allocation of resources for employees care program.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives. Petitions. Papers. Reports from committees. Notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. The Emergency Powers number 2 Continuance Resolution 2020. Whereas by virtue of Section 20, subsection 1 and 2B of the Constitution of Jamaica, the Governor General may make a proclamation declaring that a state of public emergency exists if satisfied that action has been taken or is immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety. And whereas the Governor General was satisfied that a state of public emergency existed as a result of the aforementioned circumstances, and whereas on the 14th day of June 2020, the Governor General by proclamation declared that a state of public emergency exists within parts of the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew as specified in the schedule to the proclamation, and hereinafter referred to as a specified community, and further declared that the said proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas it is provided by Section 20, subsection 3 of the Constitution of Jamaica, that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purposes of and in accordance with that section shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for 14 days or for such longer period, not exceeding 3 months, as both Houses of Parliament may determine by a resolution supported by a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House. And whereas, under the provisions of Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, it is lawful for the Governor General during a state of public emergency, by order, to make regulations for securing the essentials of life to the community. And whereas the Governor General, in exercise of the powers conferred upon him by Section 3, subsection 1 of the Emergency Powers Act, made the Emergency Powers number 2 Regulations 2020 for securing the essentials of life to the specified community during the state of public emergency. And whereas Section 3, subsection 4 of the Emergency Powers Act provides that any regulations so made shall be laid before the Senate and House of Representatives as soon as may be after they are made, and shall not continue in force after the expiration of 7 days from the time they are so laid before the Senate and the House of Representatives, whichever shall be the later, unless a resolution is passed by the Senate and House of Representatives providing for the continuance thereof. And whereas the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2020 were laid in the House of Representatives on the 16th day of June 2020 and in the Senate on the 19th day of June 2020, and whereas it is desirable that A, the state of public emergency declared as aforementioned remain and continue in force for a period of 41 days until the 25th day of July 2020, and B, the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2020 continue in force until the expiration of the state of public emergency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as the Emergency Powers No. 2 Continuance Resolution. 2. The state of public emergency declared by the Governor-General by proclamation on the 14th day of June 2020 shall remain in force for a period of 41 days until the 25th day of July 2020. And 3, the Emergency Powers No. 2 Regulations 2020 are hereby continued in force until the 25th day of July 2020. Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will ask for the suspension of standing orders to allow me to take the motion, notice of which I've just given.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business.
Mr. President, there is one item on the agenda for today, and this is the matter of the extension of the state of public emergency. In that context, Mr. President, I ask for suspension of the standing orders to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members have heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Against? Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on the advice of the security forces, a state of public emergency was declared in the Kingston Western and Kingston Central Police Divisions with effect from June 14, 2020 for an initial period of 14 days. Mr. President, this declaration has allowed for an effective span of wider operational control by linking the existing states of emergency in the Kingston East and St. Andrew South Police Divisions to create one contiguous geographical space. This space will provide an effective security corridor to enable the security forces to strategically maintain control of these areas through a more coordinated and targeted suite of operational responses. If an extension is not agreed today, Mr. President, this strategic control will come to an end on Monday, the 29th of June. Mr. President, the high level of violent crime in the Kingston Western and Central Police Divisions is of a scale and nature that not only threatens but greatly endangers public safety. And this is largely seen, Mr. President, in ruthless acts perpetrated by gangs and other criminal elements who have no regard for life or livelihood. Mr. President, the criminals have demonstrated the extreme lengths they will go to in exploiting the vulnerable and defenseless. Beyond murder and shooting, Mr. President, and the fear they engender, the destruction of the Ray market in West Kingston is only one example of the brazenness of these criminals and the sheer magnitude of the impact of crime and violence on the public in these areas. Mr. President, these developments are of grave concern to this government. We cannot turn a blind eye to the people and residents of these areas who suffer at the hands of these criminals. Mr. President, thank you. As we have often stated, one murder is one too many. We view the extension of the state of public emergency as an important part of efforts to save lives and protect the residents of communities who are most at risk. Mr. President, the government has always maintained that the implementation of emergency security measures were never meant to be an alternative to other policing strategies, and they have not been. What they do, however, and what they have done, is where the constitutional conditions are met, they have allowed the security forces to reduce the level of violent crime and other serious crimes in the short term, while we build the trust and confidence of communities and build intelligence. Mr. President, it also provides space for the government to pursue other parallel measures to address socioeconomic issues and to enhance the capacity of the security forces. They have, Mr. President, been under-resourced over many years. But all of this will take time. Mr. President, increasing mobility is underway with motorbikes, purpose-built vehicles, and patrol boats, but getting to the optimal point will take time. Improving reliance on science and technology is increasing with the build-out of DNA registry, forensic lab, training, and the use of CCTV, among other elements. But the full impact and benefit of this will take time. Increasing the welfare of our police is also improving, with the most widespread renovation and rebuilding of police stations ever undertaken. Improvements which also benefit the communities who use these places as well. But getting to everyone will take time. The work continues across economic growth and recovery, justice, education, and culture, among others. But to transform our societies will take time. So, Mr. President, today we are seeking to have extended this morning the Emergency Powers No. 2 Continuance Resolution 2020, which relates to the geographical areas comprising Kingston Central and Western Divisions. And the resolution asks that they remain in force until the 25th of July 2020, when the others in place are also slated to expire. Mr. President, the state of public emergency has been an effective tool in controlling the geographical spaces in which murders are occurring at the most chronic levels. And this has been evident by the national impact that this has had on serious crime. An examination of the broader national picture, almost 6 months into 2020, reveals an overall 14% reduction in major crimes as of June 22, 2020. All areas under a state of public emergency recorded reductions in murders and shooting. Mr. President, more particularly with respect to the states of public emergency in the Tri-Parish, in the Bi-Parish, in St. Andrews South and Kingston East divisions, the year-to-date figures as at June 22 have shown reductions in murders and shootings compared to the corresponding periods in 2019. In Kingston East, murders are down 28%, while shootings have declined by 35%. In the bi-parish areas of St. Catherine and Clarendon, murders are down by 7%, while shootings have decreased by 13%. St. Andrews South recorded similar reductions in murders and shootings by 13% and 26% respectively. In the tri-parish areas of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover, murders and shootings are down by 18% and 12% respectively. And Mr. President, the St. James State of Public Emergency, initially declared on the 18th of January 2018, although disrupted for 4 months, resulting in a major spike in murders and shootings, is now recording the lowest number of murders and shootings in 17 years, Mr. President, using the year-to-date figures as at June 22nd, 2020. The statistics, however, Mr. President, have revealed a notable increase in murders and shootings to date over last year for the Kingston Western and Central Police Divisions. As at the 22nd, the Kingston Western Police Division experienced an increase of 69% in murders, Mr. President, and 47% in shootings compared to the corresponding periods in 2019. Likewise, for the similar period in Kingston's Central Police Division, they experienced a 50% increase in murders and 41 in shootings. Within the last quarter, Mr. President, there was this spike as gang members and gang organizations seek to benefit from extortion in the Market District. They have created alliances that extend from St. Andrew South all the way across to Kingston East. In fact, Mr. President, it has been determined that 74% of the murders committed across both divisions were attributed to gang activities. Mr. President, there continues to be high levels of murder driven by non-organized criminal activity as well, including domestic disputes and a general inability of our people to resolve conflicts peacefully. We have to address that as well. We must rid our society of the scourge of crime and violence and instead foster a society where public and civil order is the norm. In containing and controlling the spread of the coronavirus, we have emphasized taking more personal responsibility in your homes, in your communities, and in your words and actions. And this is also necessary in fighting the disease of crime. The answer will lie ultimately in greater responsibility from all of us, Mr. President. Not only does the government have to do more, but parents have to become more involved in the lives of their children and teach them the fundamental lessons of decency, of character, of responsibility, of citizenship of Jamaica. Every Jamaican has to take responsibility and make public safety and health top national priorities, above politics or partisanship, and send a clear message that we will not tolerate crime and disorder. But while we work on the deeper societal transformation needed to pull us all in the same direction, Mr. President, there are spaces where safety is threatened in such and of such a nature and on so extensive a scale that public states of emergency are required. The two before us are included. Mr. President, the gains that we have made thus far should not be allowed to be eroded, nor should we surrender the momentum that the security forces have gained while we seek to build consensus around strategy and policy. Mr. President, we recently lost two hard-working members of the police force, and a senior officer was seriously injured. Once again, we send sympathies and condolences to their families, loved ones, and to the entire security force. Mr. President, they were on the job seeking to make Jamaica a safer place. And we have to support them not only by prayers and symbols of remembrance, both of which are important, but by providing the support they need to fight crime of the chronic levels that we have in pockets across Jamaica. Indeed. The criminals are not waiting on us, Mr. President. They are bent on spreading mayhem and taking lives. It is their business. Yes. They are emboldened when they perceive a political divide. In fact, they're emboldened by anything which weakens the fight against them. While we pursue consensus with our civil society partners, with the opposition, based on meetings which have taken place this week and which will continue, Mr. President, while we always respect and observe the processes through which we go, the criminals must know that we will pursue them relentlessly within the constraints of the law. And it is in this context, Mr. President, that today we seek the approval of this Honourable Senate to extend the states of public emergency in the Kingston Western and Kingston Central Police Divisions. I look forward to the contributions of my colleagues on this matter. I thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Senator Lambert Brown.
Mr. President.
Welcome, Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, let me join with the colleagues who have welcomed the new senator. She has certainly shown her colors. She has joined a growing number of lax people, including the leader of opposition business and Senator Crawford in the Senate. And as I welcome her, she knows she and I have spent some time together at another place, dealing with another matter. And she knows the outcome of that matter. And I wish her to be on that side of the outcomes in her future endeavors.
Yeah. We'll ensure.
Mr. President, we too mourn the loss of those two police officers who were so brutally murdered in Horizon Park a week or so ago. We pray for those officers who got injured. We know it must be traumatic for those who were engaged in the operation, even though they are not physically hurt. I am sure Senator Safaya Langmore will agree with me that there must be some trauma that need to be attended to. But let us not forget, Mr. President, that Horizon Park is in a zone of state of emergency. So they intervene in a place where there is a state of emergency. Yet we lost two of them, and others barely survived. So, did the state of emergency save them? Did it reduce the danger? Did it remove that mighty gun? No, it never did. So this view that the state of emergency is so great, working wonders, is something that we need to calm down and face the reality that it has failed. The state of emergency policies have failed. Not surprising, Mr. President, that it is the Governor General who is required to make this proclamation. And it's difficult today, listening to the proclamation made by the Governor General, and not reflect on the insignia worn by the Governor General. This is not a criticism of the GG. It is a call to our consciousness as a people to respect black people. It's a call which says we do not support people putting their feet on the necks of black people. I would urge from this floor of the Senate that the Governor General not only seek a review as he has done, but stop wearing that insignia. I urge him to stop wearing that insignia. Make it clear to the world that Jamaica do not support the stepping on the necks of black people anywhere, anytime. And if it happened in the past, we will not celebrate it. There is a time in this country when lawyers, including JLP lawyers like Ian Ramsey, who stood on principle and rejected the title of Queen's Counsels. Others have taken it. But I know in this country there are some of us who feel strongly about this monarchy, that standing up and saying the insignia must go is the least we can do to repair the suffering and the blood lost by our ancestors. Remove the insignia. Stop wearing it now. Having dealt with that part, I can now look at the proclamation made. Mr. President, this new extension of Kingston to the list of state of emergencies now mean that from Clarendon, border in Manchester, through St. Catherine, through Kingston, all the way to the border of St. Thomas is covered by a zone, by states of emergency. And of course the minister talked about the tri-parishes. The question is where in Jamaica that there is no state of emergency. It seems the only plan, and it seems where there's no, where on St. Mary, a few places. But the reality is, the bulk of Jamaica is covered by the state of emergency. And you ask yourself, the government didn't have the courage. The government did not have the courage to put on a state of emergency for COVID. They didn't have the courage to put on a state of emergency for COVID. But they tried to fool the people that the state of emergency brings them security. It doesn't. Mr. President, the words of this government cannot be trusted. Throughout the many discussions of the state of emergency here, the refrain from my friend Senator Sinclair and others is that you can't tell the criminals when you're going to end the state of emergency. You can't tell them when. But now the minister who visited us this morning has already declared that these states of emergencies, including this one, will end on the 25th of July. So the criminal gunmen have been told that there's an ending date, so they can wait it out. That's the folly of the argument they've always advanced. That's the folly of the argument they've always advanced. That you can't let the criminals know when it is going to end. But now they have done so. And they have done so for one simple reason. Because they do not want to call the elections during a state of emergency. And they didn't wait for July to say next week it will end. They announced the ending from now. Because the rest of the country, certainly we are aware on this side, that we need to get ready for August. And we are getting ready because a change is coming. Mr. President, I've made it clear that the state of emergency, the government words, means nothing. Let's take another big promise, a grand promise from the Prime Minister on security. That is the one, Senator Webby, you might have recalled, which said, if you vote for the Jamaica Labour Party, you'll be able to sleep with your doors and windows open and still wake up alive in the morning. That's what the Prime Minister told the nation. The reality is, Mr. President, that promise is a fleeting illusion. Will never be attained. Not only that, the record has shown that for every year, every single year since 2016, when the Prime Minister got his wish of people voting for the JLP, the crime figures, Senator Samuda, have been higher. I'm going to say crime too, but let me take it murder if you want, because I want to say something about your pet peeve about other crimes. So rest assured, I'm coming with that. So let's take murder. The murder figures, and they are conceding that. For every single year between 2016 and current, have been higher than any of the years when the PNP was government between 2012 and 2015. That's a fact. Those are your missing years when you mash up the economy. Mr. President, I'll leave him to Dr. Brennan. He's a copycat, and Brennan will deal with copycat. So, what are the numbers, Mr. President? Between 2012 and 2012, the murder rate figures was 1,097. In 2013, 1,200. 2014, 1,005, the lowest in decades. In 2015, 1,208. What are the numbers under this great Jamaica Labour Party claim of keeping us safer? 2016, 1,350, higher than every single year under the PNP. 2017, 1,616, higher than every single year under the PNP. In 2018, 1,287, higher than every single year under the PNP. Last year, it was 1,320, at least 1,326, with a couple of days of the year to run. Higher than any of the single years under the PNP. That put a lie to the Prime Minister's statement that when the PNP is in, murder is higher. That argument is dead. Dead, dead, dead. Now the Prime Minister himself seems to be repudiating the sleep with your windows open and your doors, because he no longer believes in it, because the number says he'll be a liar. The number says he'll be a liar. So he no longer believes in it. And he has gone about creating a new narrative which says the problem is that we haven't really invested in the security apparatus, in intelligence. So that's why the murder rate is so high. He no longer compare the JLP with the PNP. Just as the minister said this morning, let's work together. But when in 2015, the Prime Minister had a chance to work together, when the murder rates were low, he played politics, partisan politics, and tell the people, if you vote for me, the murder rate will be down. Well, Prime Minister, your words have been proven to be a lie, a big lie, a dirty lie. He lied. He lie. Now, Mr. President, let's look at the new narrative. Let's look at the new narrative that the Prime Minister tries to spin. In the Gleaner today, it says some of the murders externally driven. And it's a bigger issue. In fact, he has said so far, it is beyond his capacity. And I would say to the Prime Minister, if solving the murder is beyond your capacity, it's time for you to pack your bags and go. Mr. President, listen.
Would you state the point of order?
Here we go. Mr. President, just the Senator is misleading the House as to what the Prime Minister said. Prime Minister did not say that what is happening is beyond his capacity. We have always spoken of the capacity of Jamaica to deal with crime, and that's why we have needed states of public emergency, because they are at an emergency level. So the point has been misstated and he has been misquoted, Mr. President, and I need it stated for the record.
Thank you, Leader. Senator Brown, will you
continue?
lead your side, please?
Sorry? Man said, The government led by the Prime Minister is responsible for the security of the nation. And if those apparatus are beyond the capacity, then it means that he who leads that team is lacking in the capacity. Argument done. Mr. President, let me continue with your permission. The new narrative is that, oh, we didn't invest sufficiently in the architecture, national security architecture. I knew this was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. Let us invest. I could have told you your time was going to be short-lived. I could have told you, you couldn't manage. This is utter bowling than you, Mr.
You said he was called, sir?
No, this is utter bowling than the deputy can manage. Mr. President, Mr. President, this new narrative about a lack of investment in the security architecture is to cover the JLP's opposition to measures that have been taken over the years, many of which have shown success. And let me outline some of these investments that has taken place in the national security architecture, which contributed in part to the reduction in murders during the PNP time. But also has resulted, it also contributed in your time, because after 2010, the fruits of some of those infrastructure was laid bare. And the 1682 of 2009, under the JLP, that's murders, started coming down. So let's deal with some of these measures, Mr. President. The Interception of Communication Act, which allowed the security forces, through the decision of this Parliament, to go after the bad people, to go after the criminals, and to lead to convictions of drug dealers and gun runners. The Interception of Communication Act didn't get the full support from the opposition, from the JLP then. In fact, you oppose its use against somebody who have confessed to gun running and drug dealing and pled guilty and got 23 years in prison in the United States. That was part of the investment in the Interception of Communication Act that helped us. That was an investment the Prime Minister refused today to acknowledge by saying we didn't invest in it. But not just the interception of communication, the much maligned MOU, Senator Morgan, that you and your colleagues and the trolls love to talk about, played an essential part in getting rid of the cocaine dealers who were creating the murders in the western end of the country. You already have any cocaine dealer now. That MOU, much maligned. No, I can manage it. When it comes to the Constitution, you also shut your mouth, because we have neat and we have the unsigned letters. So if you have a constitutional point, take it to the court. When we have a constitutional issue, we take it to the court. But what is key is that that MOU, which the then opposition and now government criticized, was part of the investment in the national security architecture to deal with making Jamaica a safer place. So we are proud. We are proud. We are proud. We are proud that that MOU has worked to reduce the crime and get rid of some of the murderers and drug dealers out of the society. Mr. President, when the Prime Minister, when the Prime Minister, no, leave them, because the truth can't be denied. Mr. President, we invested through the ship rider agreement as did other countries in the region, to go after those who were bringing the drugs from South America. You still maintain the shipyard agreement. That Prime Minister was investing in the national security architecture. So this new narrative that there is no investment doesn't speak the truth. Doesn't speak the truth. We negotiated with our partners, international partners, the provision of several go-fast boats to help us protect our borders. We invested in the national security of Jamaica. Maybe the Prime Minister wasn't told that, or they hid that from him. But Prime Minister, we invested. So give me an explanation now for your failure to deal with the murders and to get murders at or below where the PNP left it. Mr. President, as part of the investment in the securing of Jamaica, we put in place a law called the Poker Proceeds of Crime Act, which go after the kingpins and their assets. That was how we invested in the national security of our country. We did that. So don't come and tell us, no, Prime Minister, that there's no investment. Mr. President, you'll be aware that we invested in the Evidence Act, which made it easier to try people without the witness have to be present in court. Video evidence. That was investing in the national security architecture. We came with anti-gang legislation so we could go after the gangs, which are multiplied and become super gangs under this government. That was our investment, part of our investment in the national security architecture. Mr. President, we collaborated with our overseas partners, and we established the anti-lotto task force and passed a bill into law to deal with lotto scamming. That was investing in the national security architecture of our country and to reduce the crime. We dealt with cybercrime. We had Unite for Change. We had Get the Guns campaign, and the numerous improvements we did in the administration of justice. Working with people abroad to fund, the Canadians in particular, to fund the justice reform program. Those are investments we put in to improve the national security architecture. The Prime Minister, in saying that the crime issue is no longer PNP versus JLP issue, because that has been proved by the facts to be that the JLP has failed in its last term. So it's clear to me that the Prime Minister, having told the nation that they could go to bed and sleep with the doors open, has failed. It's a promise that has failed. They now say, oh, that was an aspiration like 5 and 4. Everything they set out to do and fail, they call it aspiration. Everything they set out to do, they call it aspiration. Poverty to prosperity. And they go and say, oh, 2018, tell me what is happening today. No, it's not. And you know that. You know that. But anyway, I leave your sins. Mr. President, when it comes to this state of emergency, we have taken a position of conscience. And we do so recognizing that murders are higher than under the PNP time. But let's compare to their time. This year, with 10 states of emergencies, they have only 8 less murders than last year this time, with less SOEs.
Less than 1 per state of emergency.
So, essentially, they will tell you, oh, murders are down 1.2%. With all the efforts, and with COVID and all of that,
And with missing persons,
and in fact, not only that, they are saying that I think 50 odd, if you look at the bottom of the thing there, man, of the report I sent you, 50 odd, just look at 50 odd undetermined deaths.
Yes.
So the murder rate could very well be higher because of the classification. Look at the bottom of the page. Of the undetermined death. So that's not something 59. So that's not something to say this is a success. And yes, unless you are living in a different country from me. Mr. President, in terms of comparing their last year with this year, there's nothing to boast about. It's flat at best. It's flat at best. So you can't call that a success when last year was far higher than any year under the People's National Party. So it's clear the PNP in our last 4 years managed the murders better than this government has. And we will do so when we are returned to government. Mr. President, this year alone, 68% of the murders committed are committed in state of emergency areas. 68% of the murders committed this year are done in the state of emergency areas. That's success? That's success? Which businessman will treat that as success? Mr. President, let me tell you this. 2 weeks ago, 2 persons went to the examination depot in Flankers to conduct business. Leaving, their car was stopped by another car with men exiting the car and pumping over 50 rounds of ammunition inside that car, killing both men on the spot. That happened Claude Clark Drive. That's across from the Elegant Corridor. That's across from the airport in Montego Bay. That's across from the Resilient Corridor. Senator Webby, I am unaware of any of those men who killed those 2 men in that state of emergency being apprehended. We call that success? Those parents, those family members of those 2 are mourning, and you tell them this is your success in St. James. Then during this week gone, or is it towards the end of last week, in Union Street, which will be near the cathedral, at 2 o'clock broad daylight, a man referred to as Bounty, was murdered in Mobile during a state of emergency in broad daylight. Have those people been caught? We're not aware of that. And so, Mr. President, that is the effectiveness for them of the state of emergency. What has happened is that some of the gunmen have fled St. James. And recently we heard of a road rage incident in Manchester. In Manchester, one man draw a gun at the other. What is his address? St. James.
In Manchester.
So he left St. James to Manchester and is quick to draw a gun. Mr. President, there's a lady in Reserve, Trelawney, North Trelawney, Senator, Reserve. We know her name, but I'm not going to call her name now. The President going to tell me, say, her family going to. But you know what happened? Gunman went in on her. I don't know if her doors and windows were open following the Prime Minister's advice. And because she defended her dignity, she was prepared to give up her property. But in defending her dignity and saying no to sex, he killed her. Where did he come from? We don't know because he hasn't been held. But could it be one of those who fled from Montego Bay? Because the police in St. Trelawney will tell you that people come across the border. So this so-called success of St. James must be seen in the context of the balloon bubbling up elsewhere and killing people's lives. Senator Webby, I took a bet with you once. I won't go into the detail. And I say, I bet you, despite the cameras, they wouldn't catch those people. So, President, in the broad daylight, 11 o'clock, we sat here in the Senate. And some men went into a cameo in Santa Cruz, robbed it, looked up in the camera, and smiled. And today they're still free. And they had guns. And you tell me that the answer to that is to go after the vendors in Santa Cruz, go after the taxi men, because you have a success in St. James? The reality is that you are living in a country that is different from the one I'm living in. You talk about gunmen pinning down police in West Kingston, burning down railway, and all you give them is surveillance, not quarantine? I'll leave that to another colleague to speak to. But suffice it to say, Mr. President, that this make-believe world, this fantasy land, this state of denial that the government lives in, need to be exposed. So I say to them, Moby is not your brightest example. Not with what happened to Bounty, and not what happened near the Elegant corridor with those two people. And them other murders committed in St. James. But I'm not going to pick on St. James. I'm just picking up on the bankruptcy of the government, state of emergency policies. So, President, the lady who died with her dignity deserves our support. Her family deserves our support. Our condolences goes out to her. State of emergency squeeze there, so, and the bulge come elsewhere, and people suffer. And the evidence is there. So, President, we will come with a conscience approach to this extension. I personally have difficulty because I'm seeing signs of abuse taking place. No, man, it's short. I'll be short.
I got
so
the impression you were going on to a different topic. That's why I stopped.
No, that's fine.
Mr. President, the Speaker's time having expired, might it be extended to allow him to complete his presentation?
Members have heard the question. In favor? Aye. Against? Thank you, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, colleagues. So, President, I'm seeing signs of abuse. And let me be frank. I've always watched from the 2018 SOE for these abuse. There were not many. There were few, but not many. But in recent times, there have been an escalation of these abuses. Mr. President, let me start by saying, we're hearing, for example, to the lawyers on that side, that relatives of the detainees who go to give them food are now being photographed and fingerprints for doing what, Senator Webby? Being a relative of somebody you detain who you soon will let out? That can't right, Senator B. That can't right, Senator H. That can't right, Senator S and Senator JS.
Senator B, address me, no?
My Lord. Mr. President, Senator, through you, it can't right, Senator Braham. It can't right, Senator Hamilton. It can't right, Senator Sinclair. It can't right, Senator Johnson Smith. And my Queen's Counsel, President, it should only be right to you. That's an abuse. And it doesn't happen of the uptown people. It happens of the people in rural Jamaica and poor people. Mr. President, the public defender has pointed out that these SOEs represent efforts at net fishing. You go into a community, you grab up as many of the poor black boys as you can. And you keep them, you process them, fingerprint, pictures, you let them out. What do you do with those photographs and fingerprints? They're not criminals, but they're being treated like criminals. If you're going with your state of emergency, why aren't you spear fishing? Why isn't it intelligence-led? And you go for who committing the crime, the violence producers. And the sad thing, they go for PNP and JLP and no P. It's just not right. Not right. And then, Mr. President, I'm going to call some names because they deserve our support. Levon Duane from Bray Street in East Kingston. Killed. Homicide. And just trying for the basic right of a detainee to have an autopsy, of a murder victim to have an autopsy done. It was reported by his family that he was on his veranda eating bun and cheese and sausage. And he was killed. And the allegation is that he was killed by a member of the security force. There's a slogan, Mr. President, that's Levon Duane, Bray Street. There's a slogan, justice for Susan Bogle.
Serious one, that.
She was killed in Alderstown. Another homicide. Yeah, we agree. Another homicide. An autopsy has been done on her. But her family begs for the outcome of the autopsy in terms of the forensic. Which bullet? Who fired the bullet that pierced her chest and killed her?
One more disabled.
This is another, and one more disabled person died. And this is a case again where we're told there were confrontation involving members of the security force. So in the name of Levon Duane, in the name of justice for Susan Bogle, let their name ring in this chamber. Let Ansard record that in their name, I personally can't vote for an extension of the state of emergency. Mr. President, they died. But the young man in Majestic Garden, whose foot was broken in an incident with the security force, again, members of the military, his family deserved justice. His family ought not to suffer abuse. And for that reason, in his name, I can't personally vote for the state of emergency. Recently, in Trenchtown, MP Mark Golden was called. Soldier lick out man's teeth. Backs up other people. That's not right. That's not justice. And I can't, in those poor people from Trenchtown name, support it. Mr. President, we saw the video of a young man in Denham Town. We saw the kick from the soldier. Whatever else going on it, the reality is to me, Senator Samuda, and I hope you will say you don't support it. It seems to be abused by the security forces. I can't therefore in good conscience vote for this extension when I know that what has been happening is an increase in abuse of our citizens by members of the security force. Some live to tell the tale, but others are awaiting the outcome of the autopsies. Mr. President, it's not just the people who are being abused, but I'm told members of the Jamaican National Security Corps also feel abused by the authorities. That that's trained and sent out there, poorly trained and sent out there, and they suffer abuse from authority too. That's the report I'm getting. They are badly treated too. So for that reason, I also have difficulty supporting this. So Mr. President, what is needed is not another SOE. What is needed is a reset of how we fight crime, a reset that brings us real success, not public relations gimmicks. We need a reset that includes a crime plan, one that I called for in 2017. I said, where was the crime plan? We're told it coming. Now the Prime Minister said, we don't need a crime plan, because we have had plenty of crime plan in the past. We had one in 2014, which brought murder down to 1,005. We need a real crime plan. The so-called narrative that is a lack of investment in security that has brought us where we are, which is a repudiation of the Prime Minister's 2015 statement that vote for the JLP. And all will be well. It hasn't been well. It has gotten worse. We need a reset. We need a reset to a plan that works. And that is why the opposition has supported civil society in their call for a summit. A summit we have been trying to get since January of 2019. A summit that the government has dodged thus far. But time comes, and the people are going to ask, are we safer under Mr. Oney's sleep with your doors and windows open than we were in 2014 and 2012 to 2015? I believe the people will answer. People will answer we are not safe. The people will answer that when it comes to crime, this government is a failure. Which brings me to the issue, Mr. President. I'm sorry my colleague and friend, Senator Samuda, is outside. But let me say it, because I suspect he may be hearing. I checked the numbers because I knew them. In 2014, all major crimes went down. Yeah, man, you will speak to it? I don't have to go into detail. But all major, it's there in the WhatsApp group. All major crimes went down. In 2015, all major robbery, larceny, rape, shooting, they went down. So there's no magic about this. They went down when there was no state of emergency. And they went down by double-digit numbers. So it's not a state of emergency. That result. Let me give you One of the reasons I think they went down. And it may also apply to the period when we were in government. Mr. President, Easter Sunday morning, about 3 a.m., a man tried to break into my house. He ran quickly out. Did I report that attempted break-in? I called the police and tell them there's a prowler, so-and-so. Didn't go to the station. And the police said, we'll tell the patrols. That wouldn't show up in the break-ins attempt. No, because with murder has been a major issue. People don't go and report every little thing. Man, thief your phone outside our supermarket. You're not going to report that to the police anymore. Because the police will tell you, one, I don't have no vehicle. Because the deal for the used cars hasn't come true. So a lot of those things don't get reported. Mr. President, as I sit, I must say, this morning I said to 2 of my colleagues who sit on a certain Joint Select Committee, how could you make somebody say sexual harassment, which is could be a criminal offense, must have a 1-year cap? I want to commend you, Senator Gill, for saying 1 year is too short. I want to commend you, Senator Langmore, for saying 1 year is too short. In fact, there should be no cap. We know that people who have abused children in this country, after decades, have been convicted by our courts. So should it remain. And no Minister of Justice should be quick to tell us he doesn't, to chuckle, pun intended to him. No chuckle here, to say that is okay, it's fine, and that we must, me too, is not something we should adopt. Let me tell you something. It's good, Minister Johnson, to have 4 female senators. Maybe that will put some sanity to those who believe it's okay to harass females. I hope so.
Mr. President, on a point of clarification.
Because Senator Brown. Senator Gill, it's only because it's very unlike you, you know.
Yes,
go on.
But the member is not here to represent himself. And no, because it can't be given the impression that the member was saying that what Senator Brown would have indicated, that the 12 years is a proposal by the legislation in the first instance, and the 12 months. And I don't believe the member was suggesting that there can't be any latitude outside of that. So I thought, Mr. President,
it's not a point of clarification, it's a point of order which is well taken. Senator Brown, just moderate yourself. You're winding down.
I'm winding down. I want to thank my colleague for that intervention. But that intervention tells us that the government has policy, put a 12 months in the legislation. What government that defend women would put such a clause in the defense? I know when it comes here, if it comes here, I will be opposing it. And I see that I will get your support and others on your side, because that can't be a government policy that accepts. Mr. President, with those words, I want to make it clear that this state of emergency thing, it's dying not just because of elections. It's dying because it has been in reality ineffective. We support the need for strong security presence in communities. I think the Police Federation has said so. The commissioners have promised that in the past. We want more members of the police force. We want them on the ground. That's why we merged the JSCF and the JSCF. We want more. We want them to make it such a threat that nobody wants to go rob cambios in Santa Cruz or elsewhere. We support the security force. We support the support for them. But what we don't support is the false and fake narrative that there is no investment in the security apparatus and to protect Jamaica from outsiders. I could go through the list. Interception of communication I spoke to. The MOU, Shipwright Agreement, Go Fast Boat, Poker, Evidence Act, Anti-Gang legislation, Anti-Latter Scamming legislation, Unite for Change, Get the Guns program, Reform for Justice. We did that in the past. We will do more in the future to secure the lives of the Jamaican people. May it please you, this does not get my support.
Why? I have to carry a lot of falsehoods over there. Why?
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, Mr. President, I start out by saying that I support the extension of this SOE. And I sat and listened intently, carefully, to the presentation by Senator Lambert, bro. And there are a lot of falsehoods in it, in the commentary. And in fact, he has made a comment to say, well, he supports the security forces, but at the same time, he's casting blame on the security forces to say, even the persons who take meals for the detainees, anybody detained under SOE, that photographs are taken. I don't go by hearsay when I speak these things. I am there on the ground in an SOE area, so I'm able to see what takes place in the SOE. And you know, that comment, Senator Brown, I find to be a bit unfortunate, because from St. James right through and over into Westmoreland, I've never heard that comment. And you know how this thing about food started out? Relatives of detainees could take meals to persons anyone who was detained under the SOE. When you are detained under reasonable suspicion, what would normally happen is that you are catered for by the state, and you have specific visiting times for persons. Depending on where you fall in the alphabet, your relatives can visit you on a particular day, one day of the week. Under SOE, it could have been at the outset every day of the week. And there was a complaint that came to the Jamaica Constabulary. And I was surprised where the complaint came from, because it was done after a visit by the public defender, where the public defender made an issue of that and asked for it to be removed for relatives who would have been able to bring food, and it was then that the state undertook to provide meals for the persons who were detained under SOE. I found it a bit surprising. And I don't know about any photographs being taken because of how the system operates. So you need to go and visit a detention center, Mr. Senator Brown, and see how it operates. You know, I was humored when you said the change is coming, because I noticed that there has been a change in seating position on that side. And one particular person have moved closer to the seat that he seeks to occupy. And I suppose in another stint he will occupy that seat, but we will see. Mr. President, Senator Brown picks on little specific items, and then he makes the broad comment to say the SOE has failed, which is wrong, absolutely wrong. Because when you look on the SOEs that have been implemented in certain specific spaces, in parishes, in all of them, major crime, including murder, is reduced. Every one of them. So you're going to take out an incident in St. James. Yes, the loss of anyone's life will be frowned on. But you take out one incident a while ago referring to the person leaving from the examination depot and then say that the SOE has failed. In St. James, if we look on what existed under the previous administration, the People's National Party administration in St. James, between 2012 to 2016, murder in St. James went up by 20% year after year in the parish of St. James. And it is just not only murder that went up by 20% in St. James. The bizarre nature of the murders that were taking place. And what was the response? You had the army out. You said you had the army collaborating with the Jamaica Constabulary. You have indicated that you also incorporated the ISCF into the JCF. And you had the passage of these various legislation that you spoke about. Well, that is what he had to rely on. He had to go to, he had to move to. Because in spite of all of that in St. James and Hanover, murder kept going up. But specifically to St. James, 20% year after year. Then we got to the point where murder, when you left it, it was at 160 per year in St. James. Since that time, and with the imposition of the state of emergency, Mr. President, in St. James, murder has gone down dramatically. We moved from 345 murders, and in 1 year, we got down to 100 murders in St. James. In 2019, the state of emergency was not supported by the People's National Party, and it was removed for the first 6 months in St. James. Murder went up. But when it was re-implemented in 2019, there was a dramatic reduction. So when you were able to compare in 1 year, 2019, undisputed. But guess, at the end of 2019, we had 153 murders. But the majority would have taken place in the first 6 months when you had no SOE. In the current year, 2020, Mr. President, I am pleased as a resident of St. James to look on what it is that has taken place. And murder is bad, right? But we are at a 25-year low under a state of emergency. 25-year low in St. James. You know what that does, Mr. President? When you don't have these murders taking place and you have persons having a greater comfort level, you have people feeling better about their communities, they have better relationship with police, they feel more confident in speaking with the security forces. The attitude of the young men have changed. I have heard young men in what they call inner city communities who have spoken to, interacted with. What they say is that we don't want to go back to what was in the past. We don't want to go back there. And they themselves are willing to provide information. What has been the result of that information? In St. James in 2019, and continuing into this year, and I speak specifically between January to now in St. James, the recovery of firearms, including high-powered weapons, M16s, and other types of rifles, has been the highest in St. James. That is based on the attitude, the change, the feeling that the people have to say we are working with the security forces and providing the intelligence that is required that has assisted in the recovery of firearms. That is success, because the attitude has changed. I hear the presentation of the leader of opposition business in his last presentation on this particular SOE. And he spoke about social intervention. This government has not reduced social intervention. Has not. So I don't know what is it, why we get into this situation where it is appearing, or they want to give the impression as if, oh, you're spending on bolstering the security apparatus by investing in the police force, the Jamaica Constabulary, the military, as if it is then going to take away from social intervention activities. That is not so, Mr. President. That's a false narrative that the opposition seeks to create. False narrative. False narrative. And you know, when I listen to them, if you understand what they say, give us Zozo. Give us Zozo. And they want Zozo all over the place. But what is the principle of Zozo? What's the principle of Zozo? The principle of Zozo is to clear, which is a security action, hold, which is a security action, and intervention. And it comes in that order. Because if you have criminal activity taking place, the social intervention that you seek cannot work. Cannot work. Because that in church people want to go to, Mr. President, if gunshot firing. When you look at certain communities, let us take flankers, for example. Take flankers. Where the community center that provides social intervention, where it is located, some persons will say, I will not venture into that space because there is a potential, because I come from over that side. I can't go there. So there has to be police action. There has to be law enforcement activity in the first instance to bring calm, to reduce the tensions that exist, to remove the guns from the hands of those who have intention to use it, and so that persons can feel the comfort level and venture into those spaces. And that is what we have seen. You take it right across this particular community of Mount Salem, where you have had a Zozo under a state of emergency too. I'm sorry that Senator Horton has left, because he lived in that space as a young man. That's where he grew up. But if he was at Crawford Street, he couldn't go over 2 roads over to Peddler's Lane. He couldn't go a few roads over to Pigot Street. He couldn't go there. All they do on a day-to-day basis is straight gunshot. Mr. President, with the state of emergency and with the Zozo that is particular to that space, that there has been no murder, no shooting within that space from the implementation of the Zozo in Mount Salem. These are things that we talk about. That is success. And then when you look on having gained that control, Mr. President, you look on the social intervention that has taken place, and we must congratulate. I want to personally congratulate the Honourable Prime Minister and journalists. And I'll tell you why. Because I spoke about state of emergency. In fact, I was basically mocked when I mentioned it the first time. I was opposed by every sector. Well, but strangely enough, you support it, don't it? You have supported it. It can't pass unless you guys support it, So, yeah, man. The Honourable Prime Minister came to St. James and had a meeting with the security forces, other stakeholders in St. James. And after he had that discussion, the draft legislation came up about Zozo. And I was impressed with it. I was impressed. But let us look on what has taken place in that space in Mount Salem. One that has been represented by the People's National Party. I doubt over the history of Mount Salem that they have had a Jamaica Labour Party representative at the council level in that space. And they have, on a few occasions, had a member of parliament from the Jamaica Labour Party. Under Zozo, the improvements that have taken place by the social intervention. So we have removed major crime, no murders, no shootings having taken place in that space. But we have seen road rehabilitation, Piggott Street, Crawford Street, Peddlers Lane, Mount Salem Main Road, Barnett View Main Road, Cocoa Palm, Zozo, under Zozo. You have had major drains that have never been cleaned, Senator Crawford. It does. But for you to get there, Senator Morris, you have to ensure that you clear, you hold, and you are able to build. So you can have the social intervention just like that. The training that have taken place, capacity building amongst young people, has been significantly improved. Job opportunities, persons being allowed or brought into the system to get birth certificates, social intervention that has been taking place. So just don't speak about having social intervention without being able to control. You cannot have it without being able to control the crime. If you don't control the crime, kids are not able to go to school. People can't cross boundaries to go to church. So when you talk about success and failure, you look within the state of emergency areas and you will see real success of states of emergency. So while that is being done, Mr. President, we look in St. James. The Jamaica National Service Corps, a facility has been set up in the flankers area where the Cornwall Automotive School has been placed under the management of the Jamaica Constabulary Force, providing a facility which will provide for training of 500 young men per annum. Very good. That is what you call social intervention. That can only take place, and the young men can come from all over the Western region, participate, feel comfortable coming into a particular space in order to benefit from the training. You can't have that unless you control the crime within the space. And so this administration has placed tremendous emphasis upon ensuring that the security apparatus is built out and it is going to be sustainable. That is what we are doing, and we're not doing it to the detriment of something else. It is being an all-encompassing approach that is being taken, one that at the end of the day will be sustainable. So the budgetary allocations that have been made, which seemingly, based on the comments, are being criticized by none other than a former Minister of National Security, when he made a comparison to say, well, you're giving 10 times the amount to the security apparatus compared to what you have given to the Ministry of Education. But how are you going to control the borders? When the PNP administration left government, there is a little tale that is told about our Coast Guard vessels. If you release them from the dock, they would have sunk. We have purchased 2 brand new vessels for the Jamaica Defence Force in order to bolster their ability to control our borders. Aircraft, surveillance aircraft has been acquired. So we're not just moving along without just state of emergency and state of emergency as you seek to create a narrative. That is wrong. You are doing it right across the board. in order to achieve the success. And not only success for a short period of time, but one that is going to be sustainable for the development of Jamaica. So don't pick on little things and then say that here is a failure. It is just one aspect of dealing with crime and violence in Jamaica. Mr. President, much of what we have spoken about, much of what Senator Brown has spoken about, are things that have been spoken. We don't have to rehash it, but we know where it is that we are going. I have made a comment in the past, and I will make it again, and it does not require any amendment to the regulations that are before us. But it's one that I think that adds to fairness and allows for a person who is detained to move quickly to get his hearing. And I speak again, Mr. President, to Regulation 30 under the regulations governing the state of emergency. Because Regulation 30 allows for an authorized person without a warrant to detain pending inquiries any person whose behavior is of such a nature as to give reasonable grounds for suspecting that he has acted or is acting in a manner prejudicial to the public safety, or has committed, is committing, or is about to commit an offense against these regulations. So the detention opportunity is not carte blanche. The security forces don't get a blank check to detain people. But if you think that your detention of an individual fits within that criteria, I am saying what must happen, and I'm calling on the Commissioner of Police and the Chief of Defense Staff to have an order sent down through the Constabulary Force orders that it must be implemented, that a statement surrounding their detention is written and be available to any detainee or his attorney within 24 hours. And I will tell you why. Regulation 30 allows for the detention, as I have spoken to. The only other provision in the regulations that allows for detention of any citizen of Jamaica is the Regulation 33, which is a detention order. So those are the two provisions that speak to a detention. But under a detention order, under Regulation 33, the minister has to sign the order, and the order has to be served on the person who is detained at the time of his detention. So he receives, if you are detained under a detention order, you receive a document which sets out the reasons why you are detained. And you are aware as to why you are detained, and you will know how you can proceed thereafter to go to the tribunal to make your objection. And you know what you are objecting on. Under Regulation 30, the person is operating blind. That's how they are operating, because they may not know why they are detained, or they are not able to properly convey it to their counsel. And so I ask for that to be implemented as a practice in relation to persons who are detained, so that they are made aware. When you go to the tribunal needs something on which they can operate and to make a determination. And the first thing they start at, is there a detention order? What is contained in the detention order? If you are detained under Regulation 30, you go to the tribunal, you don't say any statement. There is nothing that is there, and it can delay the process of the hearing. And you may have to get another date if the tribunal is not willing to say, well, nothing has come, the person is going to be released. So what it also can facilitate is that it reduces the opportunity for arbitrariness on the part of the security, it reduces the opportunity for corruption from the security. And so I am asking for that to be implemented in practice, to give fairness to the system. And so when I hear the Prime Minister say we can have a state of emergency operating in Jamaica for 5 years and 7 years, it doesn't have to be offensive, and nobody has to be offended by it. Once you are able to put systems in place that allows for greater fairness and transparency. And so that is a call that I am making on the security forces, the heads of the security forces, to implement that as a practice. A statement must be written and provided or made available to detainees within 24 hours of their detention. Mr. President, I thank you. If it so pleases you, those are my comments. And I support this state of emergency extension.
Most of them are mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Senator Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start, Mr. President, by adding my own welcome to Senator Hamilton, a person who I've known. I think she's a vegetarian from my memory. That is what disqualifies me. I except for pork. But I am proud to know her, and I'm proud to have known her for a while. And while my own political affiliation calls for me to hope her stay here is long, and on this side, I also estimate that her contribution will be great. And by extension, I welcome you, and I look forward to seeing and hearing you in the Senate. Mr. President, the first time the Black Lives Matter meant something to me, movement in the United States, was seeing George Floyd. That's his name? Yeah. And the kneeling in his neck. And in observing it, I asked myself, had it been a white person looking differently, would the police feel it possible to try? And would the society feel it okay to allow? It was about 9 minutes. I felt if it was a white person, if the police tried, other people would have intervened to say no. But a police accosting a black person is so normalized that it takes a death to say something was wrong. And that was what carried to my attention, that it is really systemic, that there are a multiplicity of factors that cause it to be okay. One of which is images like the Governor General emblem that basically reinforce subliminally what is bad and what is good, what is evil and what is right. If you look at, even in Jamaica, we call ourselves poor. A man says a poor man. Applied to any other activity, poor is negative, other than a man. If you say it's a poor car, it means it don't function effective. If you say it is a poor law, it means the law no good. But we have normalized just saying I'm a poor man, and even some of us are not poor. Accept it. We don't say we have low income. I'm poor. And the term concretized subliminally in our minds a certain negative reality. And then having now seen the George Floyd thing, and to a great extent understanding the anger and the thing happening in the States, I started to read about systems and how systems function. And the definition that they give to a system is that it's a set of interconnected variables that work together to maintain the status quo. Welcome, Senator here. I repeat the definition of a system. A set of interconnected variables that work together to maintain the status quo. So when they say there's systematic prejudice in America, it means that there's a set of variables that work together to make it more difficult for the black man. And there is a set of interconnected variables in Jamaica that will make it more difficult for the poor man. But I also then start to now put my mind to maybe it is a systematic problem because crime has become status quo. You understand what I'm saying, Senator Miles? Yes. That when you look at the mathematics, and that is why status quo, the term status quo means that over time it has been normalized to be so. So when we meditate on it, if the system is there to maintain the status quo, and crime is now the status quo, where at best we can only debate on relativity, but we can't debate on absolute. None of the parties can say in the absolute we were great. At best we can say we were better than the JLP. At best. But we were still 1,000. We're just now going to highlight that you're 1,300. So therefore, if it is the status quo, what are the variables working together to then maintain the status quo? That's the question, Senator Langmo, we have to now start to ask. What is causing for this to not be a glimp, or what, a glitch? What is a blip on the thing? What is causing for, as Senator Samuda said once, the amount of people murdered in the last couple of years could fill the National Stadium? The National Stadium can hold 30,000 people. Imagine in your mind. And since independence. And there was a period that it was low. So therefore, if we look upon the last decade and a half, it possibly 3/4 of the stadium. Based on the trajectory that we have seen. Now, meditate on this, therefore. Senator Webby, I said to myself, as a mathematician, I see on this thing here that we have 600 and something murders currently. And I've said it here before. If we give every murder to a different murderer, we have 600 and something murderers. If him do one murder and stop, quit. If last year we were at 1,300, Lamy, 1,300. 1,330 to round off. If we give every murder to a different murderer, we have 1,330 murderers. How is it so impossible? How is it so difficult? How is it so hard for us as 3 million people to somehow put a dent in the efforts of 1,300 at maximum murderers? What are the variables that are working together to cause for 2.9 million of us to be held at siege by less than 2,000 of them? The Prime Minister says that we have about 360 gangs. What's the average number? Huh? About 400. If you have 10 people in a gang, it means we have 4,000 gang members at best. Well, if we have 600 gang members with 400 gangs, it means there are 1.5 people in a gang. That don't make no sense. That means that, huh? No, what's that said? No, because that was said, that don't make sense. No, but I'm saying, my brother, if we have 400 gangs with 40 people, we still not reach 1% of the population. 1% of the population would have been 30,000 people. 10% are 300,000 people. How come with businesses are being held to siege? with police force is being held to siege? How come over 20 years we haven't been able? And so, what I think, Mr. President, is that maybe we are fighting the wrong thing. Maybe we're fixing the wrong thing. Maybe we are aiming to fix crime instead of fix the system. That if we fix the set of interconnected variables, then the result would lead to a fixing in crime. So I repeat, how is it that we are intent on fighting crime, and to this date we have not defined the criminal? How is it that we can't say, I can't find with any effort on Google or anywhere to say that the majority of persons who have been convicted for murder or who have been charged for murder have these variables attached? Are they, for example, single parent homes? And I've seen nothing in the state of emergency, and I've seen nothing in the ZOSO to target single parent homes if the majority of persons entering a gang come from single parent homes. Senator Fraser Binns, I'm looking at the report here from the ZOSO. Senator Webby, don't laugh. Says human and community development effort. 14 parents participated in training in the parenting development series. 14. Senator, what? 14 in an entire community. Now, is it above our competence to recognize that the majority of parents went through our secondary system, and by extension, if we introduce parenting as a necessary course within the secondary system at the point of capture, that maybe we can intervene into one of the fires behind the criminal entities? Can we look at the systematic things, the variables that are impacting? What is leading to the disposition, the intent, and the facilitation of crime? Is it that they went to non-traditional schools? Can we look at the schools that they went to? Did they go to a school like Kingston College? The majority did not. Like Alpha Academy? The majority did not. St. George's? They went to Cornwall. The majority did not. It is likely that they dropped out of school. It is likely that they went to, and these are the more anecdotal because we don't have the research. We don't have the research to say that the majority of them dropped out in all-age school. We don't have the research. Absolutely. And therefore have the intervention if they drop out at 8th grade to ensure that we protect 8th grade. I'm searching for it. If you have it, send it to me. It don't have the research to say that the majority of people in the gangs never joined a club, a sporting activity, or a society to make it mandatory in schools that you have to do that. Is it above our competence to then start to invest? So when we say that 20 billion was spent on crime and 2 billion was spent on school, there's nothing to say that the budget to crime cannot be used to intervene in schools. So the money that you put to one way, we're saying that you are focusing on the crime aspect and the systematic portion. It's not being fixed. Because we still have schools with 2% chance of getting 5 subjects. The vast majority of Jamaican schools, secondary schools, have less than 50% chance of getting 5 subjects. The vast majority. What is the reason that a child that can talk when he was 9 months cannot learn when he's 19? What intervened to cause for a 10th grader now to be the head of a gang? What are the systematic problems? What is the reason why we cannot seem to retain nobody in the police force? As soon as 2 years pass, they say that the persons leaving the force is greater than the persons joining the force. And by extension, we cannot have the experience that is necessary. We cannot have the underground knowledge. We cannot do the community tourism because there is no consistency in the people interacting with the community. By the time you develop some level of trust, he's no longer a policeman. By the time you're ready to call him and say, I have heard, he's no longer. What is the reason why every day you say you love him and there's no evidence? This is what's happening with our police force. He stops a taximan early in the day, telling the taximan that he's breaking the law. And then later in the day, he must take that same taxi go home. That's what's happening in our police force. Not only is it exposing him to risk, but it now makes him be less likely to stop that taximan because he depends on the taximan's service. And we come and we say, oh yes, we are here for the police and we love what they're doing. And yet still, all of we in here get concession, but the police don't get none. The same man trying to stop the taximan. What is happening in the police force? They have been on the state of emergency for the last 3 years. They have got no reward in salary. They were fooled into believing they would. They were told by the government that they would get special state of emergency pay, and they were tricked to believe it because some people were asked to carry NIS and TRN. To this day, they have not received 1 cent.
What's that say? Is that 3-card government?
That's a 3-card government. Not only tell them that they're not going to get paid, collect them data and them information. And then there was no pay. Well, he knows now. He knows now. And he'll fix it. So therefore, you have asked a person, Mr. President, to exert additional effort. And you have committed no additional reward. Now, if it was short term, it might have been acceptable. But being that it is long term, it cannot be acceptable. And so, when we say why they haven't responded to this call or this shooting, the demotivation in the force is high. The demotivation in the police force is extreme. Because what they were promised have not been delivered. Let me look at what's happening in the police force. When they die in the line of duty, Senator Land, they're supposed to receive $14 million. Their family is supposed to receive that. Now, when a 26-year-old die and his family only receive $14 million, it's bad in itself. But there have been policemen that died in the line of duty that to this day don't receive their money 6-7 years after, 5 years after.
That's true.
Don't receive the money. Is it beyond our competence to privatize the life insurance so that once a policeman registered John Brown XYZ, some people bid on the police life insurance and then the private people immediately pay them instead of a man child out there 5 years? Cannot get a computer.
I have some good insurance that come up with like Canon.
You have many insurance companies out there.
Right, Senator?
Even if we're private or they must pay them.
Well, what is necessary to understand, Senator Lambert, is that we cannot trust this government. Well, let me tell you what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are debating, Senator Webby, a reality that we are asking the policemen and women of this country to exert greater effort and have done nothing to reduce the risk they will face. And because we have not reduced the risk they will face, they have then now resulted in reducing the effort and the risk that they take. And so a man knowing that last week someone died in the line of duty and his family don't get taken care of, is less enthused to respond to gunfire. Because that might be the case. And being that is the case, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old no longer say want to be a policeman because he has perceived it to be positioned as negative, and in functionality is not rewarded. And we can recruit the best of us into a thing that mentally we look down on it, and rewards are so limited. We can recruit the best of us. And I think that's a part of the system that is creating this criminal effort, this criminal mentality. It's a part of the system because once upon a time when I was growing up, you want to be a policeman. As a little boy, everybody want to be police, or a soldier in particular. Now is when you can't get no job. It's your last resort. That can't make sense. We have now where 2 policemen died and they ask for a monument. What is negative about that? And that monument can't be no local place in a crossroad. That monument can't be no police station. We must reposition the police force for them to know that they're heroes on behalf of the society.
They die
on the line of duty in an effort to protect. It must be in the National Heroes Park. How big is the National Heroes Park, Senator Lambert?
Big enough to hold it.
It is big enough to hold one monument.
Absolutely.
For the police
Big
force.
enough to hold an empty cup, no? It's big enough to hold 2 police.
We look again and we say, what are the things, what are the variables? Them say most time they're unemployed. They're not earning. So if they're not earning, what steps have we taken to now start to facilitate the avenues for which they're often likely to earn? We have taken no steps. We have taken greater steps to actually constrain the avenues that they're likely to earn. We look at entertainment as a great avenue. We see Bounty Killer on TV and Beanie Man the other day. Let me remind you that Bounty Killer used to sell figurines, as rich as he is now. His entertainment created that for him. Yeah, man. Yeah. His songs this close. Beanie Man used to lift up box. You know Beanie Man very well. Yes, I think she's connected. Connected to him legally. Now, many of the artists find. I mean, here mix up. I'm saying entertainment has proven itself to be an avenue for social mobility and an alternative to criminality that in the 1990s you used to have a full studio. Now, them just come in before them become artists. And we have not seek to facilitate, we have instead constrained. St. James have been under COVID long before COVID, Mr. President. Because the entertainment people in St. James have not earned effectively for about 3 years. They have not been allowed to earn based on the rules that have been set. And when a big event is to be kept in St. James, it is given a pass to say the rules no longer apply for the weekend of some fest, but it applied for every other little event that tried to keep. Now, maybe you guys believe that the people who are in entertainment, they do it as a side work, People losing them house. People losing them house. People losing them spouse. People losing them car. Because they are incapable to host an event. For 3 years, anyone in here, tell me what would happen in your life if you could not earn for 3 years. And not only St. James now. Where is Westmoreland? State of emergency. St. Catherine, state of emergency. Half of Kingston, state of emergency. Clarendon, state of emergency. Now, you know what is one of our problems, Senator Sinclair? We seek to identify the outlier as the norm. And any mathematician will tell us that is very dangerous. And one man might break the rule and keep a party, that's true. But the vast majority of entertainers are suffering. The mass majority of promoters are suffering within the spaces that there are states of emergencies. And they also have suffered from noise abatement as well. It has been, and they have suffered. And I await, we are wait for those corrections. Let's look, Senator. The state of emergency have curtailed dramatically many promoters' activities. The other thing we have to look at is that the state of emergency have not removed any of the facilitators of criminal activity. The last time when the police used to put out comprehensive reports, confiscation of guns were down. The last time, they don't do that anymore. They don't show the figures anymore. But they used to tell you about guns found. The number of guns found under the state of emergency was less than the number of guns found when there was none. They also used to report arrest with evidence, which means likely to convict or more likely to convict. We have not seen that, but that was down. That the arrest with evidence was down. They stopped publishing that. What kind of system we run when you try to now hide the information so that you can make a statement? What kind of system we run? This was a type of reporting for years upon years. All of a sudden, they no longer report. They used to report within the thing. The gangs have not been caught. The Prime Minister himself said, not only are they existing, but they have multiplied. Right. So look at this, Senator. If it is that the state of emergency have helped St. James, and the guns still exist, and Westmoreland, and wherever it exists, and the guns have not been recovered by the police force, but still less than before. There was a statement. All right. You know. No. The police reported correctly based on their area of reference. If it is that I am at a high school and the mathematics passes is 30%, that speaks to the principal and the head of the maths department. However, there can be an individual teacher that says, but I get 90%. That's the area of reference. The police report correctly on total guns that have been confiscated. Total guns. And the police reported, the last time that they reported it, that less was confiscated. That less was confiscated. Maybe, but for the last 3 years, it has been less. There's not been a year that is enough more. So therefore, unless them throw them guns, they're existing. The Prime Minister report that there's more gangs because he said 300 and nearly 98, and the figure that was reported before by his minister was less than that. So if there's now more gangs with guns, when the state of emergency ends, what can those communities expect? We speak to.
All of them do it wrong. But they never sing the song.
They do. Because I have heard Senator Johnson Smith say many times, even one murder is too much. And where it exists is also not a significant variable. The fact that we still have nearly equal murders this year and more murders than 2016, more murders than 2017. Why? Senator Webby, when you sell your products, water for example, I understand you have a new water on the market now and it's quite refreshing, I've been informed. The first thing you ask is how much water sell. Then now to decide how you're going to intervene, you're going to now say where it sell. But the first thing is, are we up or down in the number of water that sell? And then we say, okay, how are we doing in the east, in the west, in the north? How can we increase our whatever? Your segmentation after your total numbers. In Jamaica, the government's duty, as is yours as the overarching president of Grace Kennedy, is to say what is the total influence on crime.
Oh, Mr. President, the Speaker's time having expired, I ask that he be given enough time to complete his short presentation.
Members have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Continue, please, Senator Crawford. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Samuda.
Almost, right? The circle, the area of reference for a government is not a community. The area of reference for a government is not a parish. The area of reference for a government is not Cornwall, Middlesex, or Surrey. That would have been more like the American methodology where a man said, my state is down because he has complete control over his state. Indeed, if I heard a mayor say it, I would have said, well, mayor, that's your area of reference. The area of reference. The area of reference must be for the nation. And within the country, Mr. President, within the country, in spite of COVID, in spite of curfews, in spite of state of emergency, crime at best is down by 8, of which there is 59 undetermined, of which there's a recent graveyard found with many missing persons that might be there for this particular period in time. So I heard. Now the governments, well, that's what I heard. I've not been there. But I'm making it clear. Yeah. But yeah, I've not been there. But I'm saying that the government duty is also to that community. And the government duty is to dismantle that gang too, as well as the other 390. And the government duty is to recover the guns. And the government duty is to reduce the murder. And the government has failed at all their duties. All their duties. They have failed so badly that they are willing to report that for 1 year, 14 parents were trained. 14. And that right in the report. They say that for 1 year, 360 kids had intervention. Let me remind you, when I was a member of parliament, 400 children went to UE for 3 weeks. 400 to stay without a zoso. Because you see, there are people like you that major in the minor. There's people like you, that major in the minor. I can say to you, sir, that I personally believe that the state of emergency is a straight example of targeting the wrong issue. The systematic problems have not been addressed, and there has been no effort to address those problems by the government. The systematic issue cannot be addressed because there have been no information gathering to even define who are the likely catchment area, to define the catchment areas. We have just been running from community to community, from parish to parish, stating that there is a new state of emergency. What number state of emergency is this in West Kingston since they have started? The 4th one or the 5th one in West Kingston? and you report that they have a dramatic increase in murders in West Kingston. After total Zoso, this is the second Zoso. This is the second Zoso. And then they have had about 5 states of emergency. And you come here today to report that there is a 2 Zosos.
That's a 2 Zosos.
Two in Mount Salem and the Prime Minister said in this house at the lower level that they were going to roll out many more. 20 and more. 10 different times. So is that 200 more?
No, 10 times.
He said 20 and more 10 times. No, but Mr. President, you can't tell me not to talk. I'm saying the Prime Minister, Mr. President.
No, I'm not quarreling with what you are saying about the Prime Minister. I'm saying you're banned to Senator.
Show you, Mr. President.
Continue, man.
Mr. President, through you, I'd like to remind the Senate that the Prime Minister of Jamaica said on multiple occasions that he would roll out at least 20 more zones of special operation. And to this date, Mr. President, we're still at 2. Therefore, Mr. President, can we get any confidence from the utterances made by the Prime Minister?
No.
That is what I'm saying.
No.
So, Mr. President, I'm saying for myself that I am not voting for any extension of zones and special operation of ZOSOs today, of SOEs today. I'm not voting for the extension on behalf of the police force who have not been paid for their extended effort, on behalf of the police force who have reported, Senator Samuda, some policemen reported to me at the recent memorial for the 2 slain police officers that the bullet went through one of them vests. Are you aware of that? That the bullet pierced the bulletproof vest. And they are of the opinion that it is the quality of the vest that is questionable. I don't know if any research has been done, but I would love to know if this is the highest quality vest, because at least we should give our policemen and women the highest quality vest that exists. They reported to me that they are concerned about the quality of the vest because one of the slain policemen had on a vest for which the bullet penetrated that vest. Them expressed great concern. So with all the billions that we spend on Zoso, the police is saying that in the circumstance of their gear, cost is the greatest concern and not quality. And they are worried that we will continue to purchase what is the cheapest and not what is the best. And we're spending billions on Zoso. I am not, who get the billions, supporting the Zoso because until now, I still see them under tent, the police force, without light, with basic food, and with outhouses that should not be a permanent outcome. And we see them along the street, but we don't see them positioned in the bus stops. We don't see them in the markets. We don't see them where people congregate. We see them at the same point for the longest time. I'm not supporting the state of emergency extension for the entertainment industry. That industry has been crippled by the state of emergency and further crippled by the lack of reopening under COVID. And I'm not supporting the extension of the state of emergency for the Constitution. There have been evidence, in my opinion, of hints of dictatorship and a joy and enjoyment in putting these rules in place. There is nothing other than a management of perception that they're trying to do something with the state of emergency. So with that, Mr. President, I am expressing my lack of intention to support an extension for the state of emergency.
Senator Crawford, thank you. Senator Samuda.
I respect the independence of all of my colleague senators for them to take whichever position their conscience leads them to. I, however, would be alarmed if that position was contrary this afternoon to one that can be statistically proven to have worked to save the lives of many Jamaicans. Now, to pick up where my good friend, for those who don't know, he's my good friend, Senator Crawford left off, just to make 2 points. The entertainment industry, there is no monopoly on the care for the entertainment industry on that side. You know that I know the entertainment industry as intimately as you do. I know persons like Senator Morgan would have also worked in that industry over a long time. So we all share the impact and share the concern for any set of Jamaicans who are suffering, whether because of COVID or because of any other factor. So that point I think needs to be made before I dive into the substance of my presentation. And the second point is that, to be frank, I think the next time you get a chance to speak, the assumption and almost it comes off like a lack of regard for our entire ministry staff, ministry department, the Ministry of National Security and JCF itself. Both have very competent persons who handle research. We've had the benefit of many studies in this country by the intelligentsia, by those within the actual government service, by our multilateral partners, that has looked at the profile of criminality. It has looked at the profile of those who've been convicted. There is no lack of information, unfortunately, and that lack hasn't been there now, is not there the last term, is not there the term before, is not there the term before that. The information as to which high schools have contributed greatest to our prison population is well known, documented, and has been studied certainly since early 2000 from the studies I've seen. The information, it has been available, and your now government leader in the lower house would have had all the copies of that. However, I have no issue sharing information. It's not a secret. But to give the impression that the research and the information doesn't exist is unfortunate, because it speaks to the capacity, the competence of the hard-working men and women within the ministry, who I can tell you have contributed significantly to the strategic framework that we use. Now, to be clear, the numbers as they are, persons are able to view statistics how they want, but they're...
Before you get into this text of your speech, Senator Morgan.
120. It's 120. The time now.
You can use the one microphone, I can hear you.
Mr. President, the time now being 1:20, I ask for an extension of the standing orders to allow.
Standing. Thank you very much, Senator Morgan. You have heard the question that the standing orders. You have heard the question that the standing orders be suspended.
President, I didn't hear the motion.
Senate to
What's the question, President?
Those in favor? Those in favor? Against? Sorry, Senator Samuda.
There is... The nature of politics is that it provides, certainly in our system of government, generally a binary decision to be made. Which side performs better and which side performs worse in any number of areas. And you evaluate the areas that most impact you, and you make your decision in terms of who you put your support with. There is a fundamental fact. The numbers as it relates to both all reported crimes and murders in particular, when the former PNP administration would have assumed office in January 2012, were declining. That's a fact. So they got a trajectory that was angled downwards. They got the murder rate, certainly nothing that anyone should be proud of, at 40 persons per 100,000. And in the last year, and if we look at Q4, Senator Crawford, as a mathematician, in Q4, a trend started. In Q4 2014, the fourth quarter of 2014, calendar year, the murders went up. That happened every quarter until the PNP was no longer in office in 2016. So you inherited a trajectory going down, and we inherited a trajectory going up. The number of murders per 100,000 was at 40, and marginally increased to 42 by the end of the tenure of the last administration. So the fact is, if we're to use those statistics, we inherited a country less safe than you would have got. Unfortunate statistics. Because the truth is, in this area, whenever you're there, I want you to succeed. And whenever I'm there, you should want me to succeed, because it's Jamaican lives that we're talking about. So the simple fact is that for all of the work done, and regardless of how you see the varying policy initiatives, we were not safer at the end of that period. It was, and I was able to go back and find, admittedly not from Senator Sinclair, although I did find his voice much louder in 2015. I saw calls for need for a state of emergency measures as far back as mid-2014 because of what was happening in Western Jamaica. From business leaders, from a pastor, I don't recall the name now, and then certainly Senator Sinclair, based on what he would have been seeing politically. There were calls for this measure from then. Because what was clear then was that in the western part of the island, the crime rate was heading like that. It was heading in the wrong direction. There needed to be some intervention. You can disagree with what that intervention should have been, but there needed to be some intervention because we were heading in the wrong direction. And that's a statistical fact. Now, I reject on behalf of the government, and I certainly reject on behalf of myself, any discussion that we have not consulted and that we have not partnered with all stakeholders to look at the varying issues. I recall as far back as 2015, and I know Senator Sinclair called and asked me about what was the thinking at the time, when I would have had the pleasure to serve an organization that myself and Senator Hamilton and Senator Morgan would have had to serve in G2K as president of G2K.
I used to serve there one time.
True, Senator Gill. And Senator Johnson Smith, my apologies. But an organization that we had the chance to serve. In 2015 as president, we invited then Minister Bunting as Minister of National Security to come and speak to the political directorate in St. James, and certainly the young people that were a part of the political process, in an open meeting that we invited all stakeholders within the parish. Because we were concerned about what was taking place, and we didn't want it then to be a partisan issue. So that is my own personal record in terms of looking at how you approach national security. Now, when I consider that this government would have invited now opposition spokesperson, MP Fitzjackson, to sit in on meetings of the National Security Council, when I consider how often the Partnership Council has met and how often it has been detained with matters of national security, when I consider, and the work of ACORN as well, there is a commitment to partnership to solve this issue, Mr. President. Now, I understood from the discussion that there's an obvious misunderstanding between legislative work, which we all can do, versus investment, and I will touch on that shortly. But let us just look at the context of where we are and where we are not, so that the public is able to use those statistics to make their minds up. As at today, as at this morning, the JCF numbers show a decline of murders by 3.4%. We have had, and I was going back through the incident reports that I get every 8 hours as related to JCF, we have had 2 incidents that I could find, and I asked them to check, and so far they only see those 2. since the declarations of states of emergency in Kingston Central and Kingston Western Police Divisions, which is a remarkable decrease when you consider what was prevailing before. Now, you're down 3.4% nationally. But when we consider the fact that in Kingston and St. Andrew, it was representing 42% of the national figure in terms of murders and shootings, we had to take action. Now, the criminal acts in this area are characteristic of long-standing and deadly inter- and intra-gang conflicts or other criminal enterprise, which occur across a number of hotspots in these divisions. Today, well, certainly at the beginning of this exercise, there was an estimated 48 criminal gangs, over 50% believed to be active within the spaces. 32 gangs are actively engaged in violent conflicts within the boundaries of the police divisions. Now, this, colleagues, warranted the measures that we are debating here today. This year, there has been a notable increase in the Kingston Western area of 61% and 48% in Kingston Central in terms of number of murders, of violent crimes rather. This, Mr. President, warrants the measure we are debating today. The statistics show that there were 21 more victims, or an increase of 80% when compared to the same period last year, while 14 more persons were shot and injured, representing a 45% increase in Kingston Western. And a similar trend is evidenced by 8 more victims of murder, and which is an increase of 53%, and 7 more persons shot and injured, representative of a 44% increase. So, President, these numbers warrant the measure we are debating today. When we examine the broader national picture, almost 6 months into 2020, we have, however, seen signs of success in the implementation of our varying strategies. As at Sunday, our numbers nationally for total crimes reported were down 14%, Mr. President. In addition to the decreases in murders and shootings mentioned, robberies are down 14%, Mr. President. Break-ins are down 24%. Rape is down 28%. And larceny is down 31.2%, Mr. President. Now, shootings itself, nationally, are down 8.2%. Now, let us be clear that every incident of shooting could have been an incident of murder. So when you're down 8.2% in that space, it is not something to scoff at. Notwithstanding these gains, we were observing a more coordinated attempt by criminal enterprises across Kingston and St. Andrew. In the Kingston Western Division, it had recorded the highest number of murders of the 19 police divisions. Despite, Mr. Crawford, the 32 illegal guns that were taken off the streets in these divisions, violent crime continued. The gang warfare and criminal acts perpetrated by the gangs continued to create fear among citizens. And that is why these measures today, colleagues, are warranted. Now, if we look at states of emergency measures across the country, it's important that we look critically and that the numbers are examined. Because if we're going to say something isn't working, we need to see what it has achieved and what it hasn't. In the Kingston Eastern Police Division, Senator Crawford, murders are down 64% and shootings have declined by 70%. In the parish of St. Catherine, where you would have had an incident the other day with the police, but to be clear, the measures have resulted in a 14% decline in murders and a 24% decline in shootings. While decreases in the murder in the St. Andrew South, unfortunately, are only marginal at 1%, there is an 18% fall in the rate of shootings compared to the similar period last year before the SOE. In St. James, which is the longest running state of emergency measure, murders and shootings are the lowest in 25 and 20 years respectively, Mr. President. And the highest gun seizures have been realized this year, year to date, ever with a number of high-powered rifles, Mr. President. So we are getting the guns, we are getting the guns, We are saving lives, Mr. President. And to be quite frank, as I will touch on in a little while, we're also getting the drugs. Last year, there were increased seizures. We had record seizures of illicit narcotics. Last year, breaking all records for both cocaine and those who sought to export any other illicit material. No, that is because of investment. That's not because of legislation. That's because of investment in ships. But I come into the investments. Senator Brown. Senator Brown, I was quiet during yours. I listened to every word this Friday. So I come into your comments now, Senator Brown. No, Westmoreland and Hanover. We'd have recalled the calls for SOE there as well from 2014. And the reasons would be because with these measures now you have a 48% and 57% reduction in murders in those parishes respectively. So shootings also in Westmoreland are down 40% and shootings in Hanover are down 66% respectively year over year. Senator Crawford. So no, I mentioned trajectories. And I mentioned the need to look at statistics critically. If we had continued at the rate of increases of 20% a year, as we experienced in the last year of that administration, by now we would be at 1,900 murders a year, unfortunately. Okay? So the actions we have taken reversed an unfortunate trajectory. Now, you had increases of 20% in your last year of government. If you continued with that increasing base of 20% each year, that would have been over 200 people additionally being murdered every year. We have curtailed it now for all of the discussions in international media, everywhere. You keep hearing some talk, there's some common buzzwords now. There's social distancing. But one of the buzz terms, rather, that you hear now is flattening of the curve. If you look at our issues, and I'm always wary when we talk about statistics to do with crime in Jamaica, because every statistic is a Jamaican victim, is one of our brothers and sisters who've been harmed. So I'm wary how we talk about it and how we gloat about statistics. But to be frank, what we have done, and when you look at the statistics now, is that for the most part, we have flattened what was an unfortunate murder curve that looked like this when we got it. Yeah. That is a fact. It took a little while. We didn't get it done in year one, but we have flattened the murder curve. And that is something that we cannot disregard. Yes, there are some ups and downs, but generally it looks like that now, at that stage over the period. You want to take the problem?
Mr. President, on point of... As if the mic no one hear it. On a point of clarification, Mr. President.
Nothing don't really name, so you know. The point of order you're making.
I'll order then, sir. I heard... Yes. Yes, Mr. President. On a point of order, I'd like to understand what the Senator is saying about 20%.
That's not a point of order.
Okay, I'm seeking clarification, sir.
But you can't interrupt his presentation to ask for clarification.
Okay.
So I'll explain. I have no issues. In 2015, there was an increase of murder by 20%, Senator Crawford. So work the maths with me now. If we had continued increasing at this rate, the following year you'd have had a murder number of 1,440. And then the following year from that, you would have had a murder number of 1,728. And on that, no, but it's the facts. The statistics look like that from the last quarter of Q4 of 2014. However, anyway, the facts, no, their actual trajectory was a 20% increase in murder in the last year of the PNP administration. And that trajectory started from Q4 of 2014. Every single quarter, since the last quarter of 2014, murder numbers increased, quarter over quarter, year over year.
Mr. President, there's no way a mathematical trend can be based on 1 year.
Senator Crawford. Senator. Senator Crawford. That's not Senator Crawford. What is the point of order?
The senator is misleading the House, suggesting that 1 year creates a trajectory.
All right. Here. Senator Crawford, that's not a point of
But
order.
I've not made my statement. You have to rule after. Mr. President.
Samuda, continue.
No, Mr. President, with due respect, you can't rule before me speak, Mr. President. You have to allow me to speak and then you say it's not. I have not spoken.
No, because you're not raising a point of order. You are using the opportunity to continue your speech.
No, Mr.
Senator
President.
Samuda, continue. Thank you, Senator Crawford.
President, what we are using to determine that there was a trend is 5 quarters of information, Mr. President. 5 quarters where the murder numbers increased year over year each quarter. The trend line looked like that. That is a fact. However, Mr. President, when we consider the presentations of my colleague senators, I must ask that when we consider the successes that have been experienced in the varying states of emergencies, that those who have declared that they will not support reconsider. Because the decisions we have made have been based on the situational analysis. The strategic work being done that determines the varying investments we've made is why, when we came in, we would have had to purchase, I believe the numbers were 4,000 Kevlar vests and 2,500 helmets, because the police at the time were using expired vests and helmets. That's a fact, and I've said so in this house before and it's never been rebutted. That's a fact. Expired. Now the vests that we use are at the standards that we're supposed to use. Now, if you understand, and I don't want to get into specifics, right, because of obvious reasons. So, Senator Morris, you know, I've never interrupted you, Senator Morris, as you know. No, I've never interrupted Senator Morris. I want to interrupt my brethren, Senator Crawford. But, so I'll take the interruption from him, because I trouble him all the time. But, yeah, well, there you go. But I didn't interrupt you today. But the standards that we use are the agreed standards between the stakeholders, right? Now, to go further, and to be clear, when you consider high-powered weaponry shooting at close range, even that protection is not what you need, right? And that level of protection is why you have to use all measures available to you to take these weapons of war off of your streets. Normal policing doesn't contemplate taking close-range rifle shots. And that's an unfortunate situation, which is why we must do all in our power to get the guns. Now, I remember when we first introduced the measures in St. James, and, you know, we would do our cyclical debates for extension, and we said it required more time. And what we're saying to your colleagues is that if we're to get the results that we've gotten in St. James by staying the course, we need to stay the course in the other regions, Mr. President. The police and the officers of the JCF and the officers of the JDF have now gotten the confidence of those in St. James and in other regions. It is why you're getting the type of information now that allows you to have the most gun seizures that you ever had this year. In St. James, because you've stayed the course in a strategic direction. And staying that course is why you're seeing that benefit. So what I'm saying to colleagues is that I am asking that today, because something is working in the areas that it is being used, that we do not divert attention, we do not divert support, and that we show a united front and say, this is something that is working in these areas, let us support it this afternoon, colleagues. Now, to be clear, Senator Brown mentioned investments, but then spoke of legislation and investment of time, but not investment of necessary capital. Now, I have also been on record, both here and elsewhere, that I understand the inability to invest during the last 4 years. There was an economic program that cut capital budgets right across sectors. That, however, does not change the fact that the security apparatus and the security capacity of the country was severely diminished. So when we talk about border security and we talk about investment, one of the things we first had to buy was 2 ships. And we had to buy patrol boats, because if we had untied the boats as we got in at Port Royal, at least one of them would have sunk. So we had to come in and we had to repair our capacity, because there was none to protect our borders at that period. And that is a fact. We had to come in and we had to buy vests and helmets in Q1 as we got in to start to protect our police officers. Now, when we look at investment, when I take out these documents, right, and I look at the number of police stations and the number of projects for infrastructure for our national security apparatus, Mr. President, there is no question. Some of these investments are overdue by 20 years, Mr. President. So we are playing catch up. Let us not fool ourselves. What is taking place now is the festering of a wound that was never plugged. It was never plugged. So we are investing in greater mobility. We have invested in the science that allows for our forensics and ballistics labs to be considered best in the region, including Latin America and some to the best, certainly Central America. We're investing in surveillance. We're investing in all the things that give our police force the ability to close crimes, the ability to intervene in many cases. In hundreds of potential murders, they have intervened and saved the lives of citizens. Mr. President, when we have several MOUs have been signed, so you can stay there. And none are secret. We have, however, signed several and made those public. However, let us be clear. The need for intervention, and Senator Crawford is right on one thing. Misguided didn't know how he got there, but he got to the right location even though taking a wrong turn, I believe. The need to retarget and refashion how we do social intervention is critical as a part of your national security strategy. And that is precisely why Plan Secure Jamaica encompasses all of these elements and ensures that the schools that have been greatest affected and have unfortunately had more graduates or attendees end up in our prison systems get the sort of benefit and the sort of investment that they need, not just in terms of cash, but in terms of teacher training, in terms of all of the interventions that are required. Mr. President, one of the points, on the last lap now, one of the points that has often left me befuddled, because no matter how many times myself and all of my colleagues, senators who have presented, have said that there is no plan. Mr. President, you don't get to 14% reduction in crime with no plan. Mr. President, there are many elements to the planning process that the hard-working men and women of the national security architecture have put into place to get us where we are. Mr. President, when you think of the JCF, and you look at their corporate plan at the end of each budget year, and they give you their targets. Because one of the times I remember Senator Crawford had said there are no targets. Well, the targets for murder reduction and crime reduction and public order exist in the JCF corporate plan, which is published annually at the end of each fiscal year. Murder target, of course, hasn't been met. Because the truth is, Senator Crawford, we want to get murders in this country down to 16 per 100,000. And we're not there. No, the truth is, so you didn't fail. The truth is, Senator Crawford, we have reduced crime in this country, and I am proud of that. However, to be clear, there is a lot of work to be done as it relates to the gangs, the drugs, and the dons. And our work, Mr. President, is going after those. And these measures, Mr. President, will help us to achieve that. The numbers in the SOEs speak for themselves. We ask on behalf, you spoke on behalf of some people, and I ask on behalf of the people of West Kingston and Central Kingston this afternoon, Senator Crawford, for the extension, because they are safer today because of the extension. Rosie can speak on behalf of herself. I am, however, no, you're not speaking on behalf of Rosie. Rosie don't want to stay down at Central Kingston, no. Mr. President, I am making the appeal to my colleague senators on behalf of the Jamaicans who live in the Kingston Western and Kingston Central Police Division who are safer because of the measures, that my colleague senators give us the support we need this evening to extend the measures to save lives and protect property. Should it please you, Mr. President?
Thank you, Senator Samuda. Senator Morris, I recognize you from the leader's chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I will rise to participate. I rise to participate in this debate on the resolution to extend the SOE. And before I do so, Mr. President, I would like to also take the opportunity to extend a warm welcome to Senator Hamilton. I wasn't in the chamber when she was being sworn in. I was outside on a meeting call, but you know, we have had 5 beautiful ladies in the Senate, and it's a wonderful thing to have a 6th individual, beautiful lady joining us, and want to welcome you, Senator, to you are colorblind. Mr. President, you know, as I participate in this debate, I want to say to Senator Johnson Smith that when we are having sensitive debates such as this, not to let Senator Sinclair speak, because it costs you a vital vote. A vital vote. Because, you know, I was weighing my mind. I was weighing my mind in terms of supporting this resolution. But, you know, when I heard Senator Sinclair, I was forced to step back, and every member here know that I have had a position when it comes on to these states of emergency, because I adopt a principled, fundamental position as it relates to how we treat the constitutional rights of the citizens of Jamaica.
Sorry, Senator Morris, you know that if you tell him what it is that you found offensive, he might withdraw it and save us something.
Yeah, no, Mr. President, I'm not gonna, Mr. President, you should not interfere in the debate, Mr. President. You are the presiding officer, you shouldn't be interfering in the debate. So I adopt a principled position as it relates to the Constitution of Jamaica, because it's not something that you treat on a willy-nilly basis, and you use it sparingly. And I have seen it being used as a crime-fighting tool for the past 2.5 years. And that has serious concerns for me, because you can't use the Constitution as your major crime-fighting strategy. That, for me, Senator Samuda, doesn't amount to a crime-fighting plan. And so I have some serious concerns. And I am very much frustrated in terms of the government's approach to fighting this monster that impacts on all of us, because crime doesn't look at an individual and say, you are a PNP or you are a JLP. or no pay at all, it affects all of us. But I am very much concerned in terms of how we have been treating it. You see, the thing is that crime is strongly linked to the levels of social injustice and inequality within our society. And when Senator Crawford spoke, he made mention of how is it that we analyze and move about forming strategies to deal with the problem. So if it is that we say that crime is as a result of the levels of inequalities and social injustice within the society, we have to make sure that we treat with and correct those problems. And so when I listened to Senator Sinclair and his intimations, as if he was frowning upon the imperative for social programs and policies to be at the forefront of the government strategy, I have some concerns. Because let me tell you something, Mr. President. In 2018, I indicated and pointed out, I called for in this August body, the establishment of more social workers, for example, in the system, to help deal with some of the tensions in communities across the country. Some of the tensions that have contributed to domestic violence, which Senator Samuda is about 30% of the murders in the country. I am certain that if we had a greater cadre of social workers in the governmental structure, we would be further ahead in terms of dealing with this crime monster that has bedeviled our society. And I am certain that in the 2.5 years since I've made that call, we would have seen, if we initiated a training program for more social workers, we would be well on our way in terms of getting more social workers in the system. And I am repeating that call because in very short order, Senator Samuda, a change will blow. A change will blow. And the change will see a new administration, and when that new administration comes to the fore, we are going to inject in the largest investment of social workers ever seen in this country to help tackle and deal with the crime monster in Jamaica. There will be no change. Time shall tell. Time shall tell. But, Mr. President, one other thing that I have taken note of, and Senator Crawford spoke to the whole importance of education in the process. And that for me is fundamental, because if it is that we are going to tackle the social injustice within our society, education has to play a pivotal role. And you know, Mr. President, I was doing some research the other day, and stumbled upon some information in the 2010 standby agreement with the IMF, and it grabbed my attention because of some questions that I had tabled in the Senate asking about tertiary education and the funding of tertiary education. And that, in that standby agreement in 2010, it spoke to the cut in expenditure to tertiary institution and to effectively replace the existing or the then model of funding tertiary education, which was the 80-20 model, and introduce a flat fee rate, effectively cutting expenditure to tertiary institutions in Jamaica. And we see now the results of such a short-sighted approach, because those tertiary institutions are buckling under financial pressure. And we see where you have about 2,500, 3,000 students don't know how it is that they are going to pay their tuition fee at the University of the West Indies, for example, come September. And I am wondering what is going to happen to these students, Senator Samuda, if they can't find resources to venture into their education. Is it that they are going to turn to a life of crime? I am very much concerned, and these are the things that contributes to my frustration, because we are not adopting a cohesive approach to fighting crime. And it is these social inequities and injustice within the society that have contributed to flare-ups in communities right across the country. Somebody was telling me the other day that when the shooting took place in West Kingston a couple weeks ago, after the 9-night, the police went to intervene in that 9-night, that the people were vexed because they saw elsewhere a 9-night taking place and no social distancing practice was being observed. So you have one set of rules for the Medes and one set for the Persians. And so the people see these inequalities. And we have to correct them in the society. You know, Mr. President, when I see again, yesterday or the day before, I heard the news of an outbreak of COVID in a community in West Kingston. I think they said that they had identified 5 cases there. And then in St. Mary in Enfield, there was an outbreak. And also out in Bull Bay. And in Corn Peace. And immediately the government locked down those communities. And in the community in West Kingston, 5 cases were identified. But I don't hear of any simultaneous lockdown of those communities to help the health workers to cauterize the problem. It's double standards and hypocrisy that is taking place, and you can't use the whole issue of political support and preference to curtail this pandemic of COVID that is bedeviling us. Mr. President, I am very much concerned. I am very much concerned because the truth is that Jamaica belongs to all of us. Jamaica belongs to all of us. I have absolutely nowhere else to go. I maintain a visa and a passport to travel on official business and on university business and for vacation. But apart from that, Senator Samuda, no matter what, right, yes, sir, Jamaica is where I will stay. Jamaica is where I will stay. I have never, despite getting offers to work overseas, never accepted any of them. Because Jamaica is where Jamaica is my choice and Jamaica is my home. And I want to see us correct. I want to see us correcting this monster that is bedeviling our society. But it can't be done, Mr. President, with double standards. It can't be done with us not paying attention to the levels of inequality within the society and the social injustice that exists in our society. And so, Mr. President, as we debate this resolution today, I am very, very hard pressed in giving my support because I am very much concerned about how the government has gone about doing its business. Very much concerned. And so, Mr. President, I await the roll. And I will declare my vote then. May it please you, Mr. President. Matthew,
thank you, Senator Morris. Minister?
You know, one of the reasons why you get 30 senators over there, you know, is because you are majority.
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank all my colleagues for their contributions to the Senate today. As always, it's a robust debate where persons share their considered views and their understanding of the important matters before us. What we can definitely say is that the matter is not treated lightly in this chamber. As it is not elsewhere, I must say, it's a matter that every time it comes before us is given the energy and the scrutiny that it deserves, because it is important. And the fact is that we not only rely, Mr. President, on the advice of the security forces, but we certainly also ensure that the elements required by the Constitution are present where states of emergency have been called. So I hear the point raised by my colleague who is now sitting in the position of the Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate. And I understand, of course, that lawyers' positions differ. This is why the profession is always such an interesting forum within which to practice. But we are confident that the approach which has been taken is the appropriate approach for the chronic levels of violent crime and murder in particular that we have been experiencing. So I want to just make the point that the fact that the gross and horrendous attack against our police in Horizon Park took place in a state of emergency, the fact that a high percentage of murders that have occurred in this year have taken place within state of emergency, they don't support an argument that the state of emergency is failing. They support the argument as to why the state of emergency are needed. And it is as clear as day to me and to the persons within those communities that the fact is that the states of emergency have been declared in areas where crime is so chronic, where the threat to public safety is so on so large a scale and so dangerous a scope as to imperil public safety. And this is, Mr. President, borne out by the facts, as I shared earlier and as Senator Samuda shared earlier, the reducing murders and shootings in communities where state of emergency have been declared, and the overall reduction in major crimes across the island speak for themselves. They are facts, Mr. President, and as people often say, facts have no friends. This is the reality. We are not where we want to be. We are not where we need to be as a nation. But the states of emergency have been important and continue to be important for the purpose they serve. Mr. President, I'm not going to go back into rebutting the issue of this new narrative that's being alleged regarding underinvestment in security infrastructure. Again, the numbers speak for themselves, and I know when the Minister of National Security presents his sectoral, his contribution to the sectoral debate, they all will be laid clear once more about the significant investment and work that has been done over the past 4 years. Mr. President, this is not to say that important legislation has been worked on across administrations. They're all a part of the process. But it's not to say that because one has been done, the other wasn't needed. The fact is that our security forces have been under-resourced for decades. And this is unfortunate. And it has taken dedicated policy choices and choices about budget to determine a sustainable path to correcting that. And we've been on that path. This has not been to the exclusion of matters related to the social and economic elements of our path to development. But they are, Mr. President, necessary and important, and there are things that take time. So we keep, as Senator Samuda said, trying to have a binary discussion. If you're doing this, it means that that is not important to you. Or if you're doing that, it means that this is not. No. Everything is important. What we need is a total transformation. But in order for social programs to work sustainably, as has been demonstrated, you must reduce crime. People must not feel fear to leave their homes to go kick ball down the street. People must feel that they can go to the homework learning center or send their children there while they are at work. You cannot do those things where the dons and the guns and the gangs are the ones in charge. And therefore, it is important for us to be able to, yes, clear, hold, and build. And we will, Mr. President, and all of these things don't happen immediately. So we have already signaled that there will be more ZOSOs declared. That has been signaled. They take resources, they take money, it takes cash to care, yes, and those resources have to be put in place. And as may be recalled, one of the international agreements that I have signed as Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is the cooperation agreement with the EU, which will be providing us with 20 million euros over a period of time, which will assist directly with the implementation of the social aspects of the zones of special operation. So this is something which is about to come to fruition, but as I said, these things take time. So we have never said that we are resiling from ZOSOs. We have never said that we are that we don't think that social programs should be followed or implemented. What we have said is that we have to deal with chronic murder rates where they exist because the communities need it. Lives need to be saved. Mr. President, also for the record, I just want to make the point regarding security presence. I often hear the opposition raising this point to say that security presence does not require a state of emergency. And at the most basic level of an argument, in the sense of the actual presence of a number, one cannot fault. However, the reality, Mr. President, of the flexibility and the operational effectiveness of any joint patrol is multiplied under a state of emergency as opposed to without it. The reality is that the JDF has no right, they have no authority to act as a constable in and of themselves. So they must patrol with the police. We don't have enough police. So if you are only relying on the police or you have just the JDF without the police, you're not going to have an effective patrol. This is a reality. Ask any. You can have joint forces, but they require more people and they are less effective. And this is a reality. Ask any member of the JDF, any member of the JCF at any rank. You don't have to be a part of the leadership to understand that. That is the reality. So to keep repeating this narrative that all people want is boots on the ground, they don't work as well if they are not under an SOE. It's not that it's not possible. It's just not, it's not a sensible narrative to continue, Mr. President. It's not right. Now, regarding the need for social workers, this is something with which I agree. We need more social workers. We have always thought so. But we also need to make sure that they are deployed effectively. And this is actually a challenge that exists across the piece. There are some places where they are tripping over each other, and there are places where there are not enough. And this is why, Mr. President, the government is actually about to undertake a review of social work and its practice across the system so we can implement something that works for the benefit of the people on the ground and not just done in a knee-jerk reaction. So, Mr. President, you will hear more about that in the coming days as well. And absolutely, we have increased the number of community health aides and we have implemented more social workers, but I always agree with the position that people don't have enough of that kind of support, that type of welfare support in the communities, in several communities, and therefore it is something that we always keep in mind. But Mr. President, in that, having made those comments, or rather having addressed those matters raised in the debate, I simply wish to ask once more for the support of this House, the support of this chamber, for the extension of the states of emergency which now exist under the Emergency Powers Number 2 Continuance Resolution 2020. Mr. President, I ask for the chamber's support.
Members, thank you. Members, thank you very much for your contribution to this debate. Senator Sinclair, thank you. Thank you very much for your contribution to this debate. Minister has closed the debate, and the question is that the emergency power.
Senator Brown? No. Senator Crawford? No. Senator Fraser Beans? Yes. Senator Gale? Yes. Senator Hamilton? Yes. Senator Horton? Johnson Smith? Yes. Senator Knight? Senator Longmore? Yes. Senator Morgan? Yes. Senator Morris? Senator Morrison? Yes. Senator Samuda? Yes. Senator Scott Motley? Senator Sinclair? Yes. Senator Skeffrey? Yes. Senator Webby? Senator Webby? Yes. Senator Williams? Thank you. The President.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I do report as follows. Noes 3, absent 3, 15 ayes. The motion is approved. Minister.
Mr. President, there's just a small matter which we need to address. I need to seek the leave of the Senate to withdraw the motion at item 1 on the order paper standing in my name. There is a matter wherein the date actually needs to be amended, and it will be amended in the lower house, and accordingly it's being withdrawn in both places for the retabling, and we can then take it. So I seek the leave of the Senate to have that matter.
To recommit?
No, simply to withdraw.
Okay, thank you very much. The members have heard the...
Just to be clear, President, we're talking about the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act and that the appointment of members to boards. You're withdrawing that motion?
Yes, because there's a date that has to be changed. It has to be withdrawn.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for your clarification.
Clear, just to be clear, was this motion carried in the other place? It was carried in the other place, but it's been withdrawn from the Senate. It's not going to get Senate support. Having been voted on by them down there, they're going to withdraw it. I understand. Thank you.
It doesn't make sense for us, just for the record. If they have to withdraw it in the lower house, it doesn't make sense for us, or rather we can't take this one. So it's being withdrawn so that both houses can withdraw and retable. It's
just clarification.
A new one will be brought here because it's not been taken yet.
What I'm understanding is that the other place approved it with the flaws. Voted on by a majority.
I want to call it a flaw, but I understand what it is. The date from when it was passed there.
And that's not a flaw?
Hang on. At the time it was passed, there was nothing wrong with the date. But with the passage of time, the date that it came to come to us, the date has become irrelevant.
You're saying that when they passed it, the date was relevant? Because it strikes me from the discussion here that they passed something which was bad law, but they do it in rush all the time, so forgive them.
The question is, you have heard the minister's approval. I'm sorry, you have heard the minister's request. All in favor? Against? Minister? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's not intended to do any further business today. Might I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
Thank you very much. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Thank you. This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.